listening to episode 175 of Mitolife Radio. I'm your host, Matt Blackburn, and today I'm speaking once again with Atom Bergstrom. Adam's a frequent guest on the show that I always learn so much from. I'm always taking so many notes, and I always walk away with something cool that I can implement into my life. He just released a new ebook called Copper, the Good, the Bad, and the Valid. And the subject of copper and retinol, vitamin A, is really trending now. I don't know how much I had to do with it, having Morley Robbins on the show and just raving all the time about how his dot connecting is so genius and useful in today's world. And I know my friend Justin and Kate over at Extreme Health Radio, great podcast, highly recommend it. They've also had Morley on, and that's actually how I originally learned about Morley Robbins several years ago, was through them. And this information's absolutely changed my life. I've been into minerals for a long time and studying magnesium and taking all different forms of minerals and researching their interactions, but this is just a whole nother level. And what I appreciate about Atom Bergstrom is he always challenges, like I do, the mainstream, even alternative health narrative. Adam really goes against the grain and always raises some really interesting questions. And I think asking questions is always a good idea as long as it's not coming from a place of fear, like irrational fear. If it's grounded questioning, then I think it's very constructive. And that's exactly what Adam does. So in his copper book, he has 20 chapters, and copper and color. I'm just going to name off some of the chapter names here. Copper kills germs, copper and cancer, copper and blue blood, excess copper in plants, copper in dog food, copper in vessels and pipes, copper and lipofuscin, copper in potatoes, cashews, and chocolate, sunflower seeds, mushrooms, beef liver, other copper foods, copper and melanin. And I've read through it a little bit, and I really enjoy it. And what's so fascinating to me about the whole topic of minerals is they could either help or harm. And I think for a lot of people, especially elderly populations that are just supplementing what their doctor gave them, which is vitamin D3, multivitamins, multimineral supplements, calcium supplements, it's just throwing them further out of balance. And so I think this message can't be shared enough that we need to look into minerals more, be cautious with them, and take the right ones if we're going to supplement. And then there's the whole topic of whole food form versus supplement form, which is a completely different podcast. But we also talk about other stuff, of course, as Adam is an encyclopedia of a human being. So he talks about the fourth nervous system, talks about olive oil and the benefits of putting that in the sun. We talk about blood donation, potatoes, boron, what the one food is that Adam's found that doesn't interfere with the digestion of orange juice. He shares simple food that detoxifies chlorine. Talk about eye color changing, blackstrap molasses, and near the end of the show, he rants about how genes are overrated, in his opinion. So enjoy the show. Here is Atom Bergstrom. All right, Atom Bergstrom, welcome back to the show.
I'm glad to be here. Through the magic of the internet, all the way from Idaho to California.
It's a pretty far distance. I heard.
It's a ways. At least, 1,500 miles, something like that.
Yeah, have you heard the wire used to be made from iron originally, and then they switched to copper because it conducts faster?
I think I heard that. The fastest conductor of all is silver. But that's a little too expensive to do wires with.
Yeah. I just got a sterling silver little measuring spoons. Little like fourth of a teaspoon scoops. And it's really hard to find sterling silver. Like I've scoured antique stores, and I guess people just buy them out.
Yeah, yeah, they do. A friend of mine actually had gold silverware. Eat it on gold.
Wow, that's incredible. What do you think about? This is a completely random question. Like gold and silver, people buying those because you can't eat them. My perspective is like kind of getting food security down first, and I think you emphasize that a lot on social media, getting people back to growing their own food. But yeah, the gold and silver thing are fascinating because that's been, I know people create whole businesses around that, and
Yeah, I think it's better than Bitcoin because eventually Bitcoin is going to be taken over by the government. There's just no way. And people think it's all safe on the internet. All they can find out if you have Bitcoin, then they just come to your house with a gun and say, okay, let me take your computer, everything away from you and put you in jail. So, but right now, as an investment, people can make money because it's like the stock market up and down. But eventually the government, like in China and other countries, are going to take the whole thing over.
Yeah,
gold and
yeah.
silver,
My long-term plan, like,
you better have
okay,
stash.
yeah, and guns to protect it, right?
Yeah, and now the trouble is stashing gold and silver with satellites. They can use imagery and find small amounts of gold on your property. You might not even be safe there anymore. Before you could hide it, they couldn't find it. I had a friend who used to hide his money in the wall of his house. In fact, sometimes that's been done, and people have construction crews, new owners, and they find all this money in the house, and they have to argue about who gets it: the employee, the company, or the householder.
I do that with white C&H cane sugar. I hide that in the walls.
Right, there you go. Watch out for ants. The ants love the sugar more than I do.
Yeah, I just saw my first hummingbird up here in North Idaho this morning, the first of the year, and so I filled up my hummingbird feeder, my filtered water, and C&H sugar.
They're fantastic birds. They're aerodynamically impossible too. I forget how fast their wingspan is. It's like mind-boggling.
Yeah, they're a unique bird, and they have like a tongue, right, that like sticks out.
They do. And I believe most animals other than humans don't see red, but hummingbirds do, butterflies do, because red is important for their survival to get the correct plants. But like most animals, it miss red and they go up into violet. Like a bee will see when what we see as white, they see as turquoise. It's all like shifted around. So color is kind of it just depends on what colors you're mixing. In fact, if you take two colors, like if I take red and green, or orange and turquoise, and spin it on a wheel, you get gray all the time. They cancel each other out.
Wow. Yeah, it's taking me back to my clay days because I grew up sculpting clay, and I would mix different colors. And just that piece alone of learning what colors mix together to make what was a pretty interesting learning experience.
It is definitely. Color is fascinating, and you could use it for analysis, and you can use it for healing. I've actually followed some of Gadiali's instructions, and one time we had a kitty cat showed up at the door, and my girlfriend was all upset about, we got to save this kitty. So I remembered that animals are more susceptible to color therapy than humans are even. So we did what's called surrogate muscle testing and found out what the kitty was, what color they needed. It was green and orange. So all we had was a green bulb. So I plugged it in, 5 minutes on. This is the trick with color, 5 minutes off. 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off. The kitty threw up and got well. We had taken it to a vet, and the vet said, let me put the cat to sleep. There's no way a full-grown cat can survive this disease. I'm not familiar with veterinary diseases, whatever it was. But when I brought the kitty cat back to him, he was amazed. He couldn't believe that it could possibly happen. And the cat got better. I mean, minutes after we finished, 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off for about a half hour.
Wow. Do you think that was because it was clearing traumas from the cat?
Yeah, I really think so. Animals have traumas too. If you take, in fact, there's been books written on animal traumas where if you take a dog and someone abuses them, it'll be in their nervous system for life. My half brother exploded firecrackers when our dachshund came up to run to him. And he jumped. He was so frightened when my brother threw a cherry bomb at him that he jumped a fence he couldn't jump, probably hurt himself. And he was afraid of the slightest backfire of a car for the rest of his life. 4th of July was a nightmare for our dachshund.
Wow. Yeah, that's sad. Yeah, I really feel for animals because they're kind of a prisoner or a victim of the owners. So most pet owners probably are barely taking care of themselves, drinking tap water and whatever else, and their pets are just on the same program and being locked inside. That's the worst, I think.
You know, I found out you can actually mind hack a pet by using the cornerstone technique on their paws. If you can get the dog to lie on its back, you can't do this with a cat, by the way, but with a dog, a lot of them will cooperate. And you'll find that they generally have a trauma left and right with male and female, and usually with the owner is who they have the trauma with. There's some kind of connection there. Because like the first dog I ever did that with, I turned the paws, and she could hear the owner's voice in the next room, and right away the right paw just stiffened up. So they have traumas too. I've only done 5 dogs because they're not very cooperative. To find a dog that will lie on its back and just let you turn its feet in a figure 8 position for about 5 minutes, it's unusual. But I did find 5 of them.
Wow. Is the trauma, you think, different in mammalian animals versus, like, say, frogs or lizards or snakes?
You know, I think it might have some kind of relevance with left-right, too, because left-right is kind of how the universe is developed. We're in a clockwise direction. There are more people with reverse organs south of the equator, by the way, because of the Coriolis effect. But right now, everyone you see, no matter where their heart is on the, at least in the northern hemisphere, and the southern, actually I've worked in New Zealand on people too, you'll find male traumas on the left, and female traumas on the right. And it sounds so metaphysical and woo-woo, but it's a fact. I've demonstrated over and over again. You can find out basically who's the matter with you by simply turning the feet. I mistakenly called it body dowsing at one time, but it's not woo-woo. This is like gross motor movements. Like if you wave your arm up in the air, you're going to feel it. If you wave your left arm, you're going to feel it in the left arm. Your right, you're going to feel it in the right. Well, when the leg moves, but you haven't moved anything else, it's the brain moving, and the brain moves it every time you have any kind of a shock or trauma that's unresolved.
Wow. And I might have asked you this in a previous show, but if we experience something and we can't process the emotions, then we store it in our, like, fascia and muscle, right?
They call it body armor. Yeah, it's a very real deal. And a lot of things cannot be resolved. Like if you have a relative and they died tragically, it's really hard. You really resolve it, but you can't really clear it because it's going to be in there. And in fact, you don't want to get rid of the memory. The memory is very useful, so you don't do things again that you found mistakes on. But you want to resolve it so it doesn't impede your life. many people don't realize that these traumas in them are directing their decisions to make decisions throughout their lives. So it's a shock, like almost like possession, making the decision instead of their free will. And they'll swear, no, I decided that. But you look back and you see their parents made the same decisions, moved to the same towns, did the same things, even on the same day that the person did. Same date, like August 17th or something like that. It's really amazing.
Wow. And you add parasites to the mix, right? Mind controlling.
Yeah, could be. You never know nowadays. Back in the 90s, they had flies and mosquitoes that were surveillance device and cockroaches that crawled through walls. This is in the 90s. I first heard a general talk about that on Charlie Rose, and I'd never seen Charlie Rose before. I thought it was a new afternoon Saturday Night Live, and then I realized this is for real. It's for real. The general, he was the head of the Army Chief of Staff. He would call people creatures instead of humans. So I really thought it was a spoof, but it was the real deal.
That's hilarious. Speaking of general, I was smoking a cigar on my deck the other day, and I was reading the Health Benefits of Tobacco book, which is pretty interesting. He was bashing the Surgeon General, saying like, it's like the Federal Express. It's like nothing to do with, just we look up to, on every, tobacco package, it'll have the Surgeon General's warning. And he was basically saying that was BS. And, there's a difference between cigarettes and cigars. Pretty interesting stuff.
Well, smoking can actually kick back Alzheimer's. And you find it if people do smoke tobacco, coffee is the antidote. That's why coffee drinkers, you often see smokers instinctively drinking coffee with their cigarettes. It actually gives them some protection.
Wow. Yeah, I found a study from 2004 called Smoking Can Be Good for You on PubMed, and it was listing all of the conditions benefited from nicotine. And I knew about Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, but I didn't know about like preeclampsia, fibroids, ulcerative colitis, herpes, and acne. Like those were multiple I didn't know that nicotine helps with. It's fascinating.
Well, everything has a yes, no, maybe function. It's something that's good for you at one hand. One of the things I liked about Emmanuel Ribisi, he understood that you have yin and yang. Most medical doctors forget the other side. They tend to go to one side. This is good and that's it. And the other is bad. And actually, it depends on the context and what you're doing. For instance, a cure for cancer is heart disease. But if you say between cancer and heart disease, it's okay. Cancer is actually an antidote for old age, and old age is an antidote for cancer. You want to get a type of cancer called youth, because cancer is overusing and lipofuscin is overaging.
Yeah, I really appreciate your focus and work on. Okay.
Prevent cancer.
Sorry. Wow. Sorry, there's a little delay, so we'll get used to it, I'm sure.
Yeah. I just wait. After I stop talking, I just wait a second. It seems to work out okay.
Yep. We'll get the rhythm. That's interesting about lipofuscin. Yeah. I recently started talking about cod liver oil and researching it in the history, because unlike fish oil, like especially like Costco and just all the fish oil, I would say any fish oil, it's kind of a new invention, right? I mean, I think Scandinavian people and people in northern climates were consuming it, but they were like doing it kind of in a really old school way, like kind of putrefaction, and cod liver oil, where they just kind of let the oil drain from the liver, seemed to be more natural. Like I was reading this morning how the Vikings consumed cod liver oil mostly in the winter months, And I wonder if, they probably knew about the vitamin D at some level in it, but it was probably more for the vitamin A and maybe even the PUFAs helping them with antifreeze, right? In those extremely cold climates.
There is an antifreeze element to those type of oils. Now, strangely enough, there's other options too. One of the deepest swimming fish is the orange roughy. They're low in DHA, almost none, and yet they live 300 years without it. So, but if you're going to be in a cold, extra cold climate like the Antarctic shark, there's one there that lives to over 1,000 years in some cases, and they're high in omega-3 fatty acids. So they attribute that. But then the orange roughy makes you wonder that, in other words, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Excuse me, animal lovers.
Interesting. Yeah, lately I've just been meditating on, it's still like 30 to 40 degrees here for the next several weeks. We haven't officially hit summer yet here in North Idaho. And some people, that's like a jacuzzi. Like, what are you talking about, Matt? That's, you're not below freezing. That's really hot temperatures. But for a lot of people that I interact with on social media, they're in like Southern California or Texas or Hawaii or Mexico. That's like 90% of the people I interact with. And, the difference in lifestyle I find and how, what you take and what foods you eat. I think you said on one of our last shows that if you're in a cold climate, you generally need to eat more animal products and meat.
Usually, because there's no other option in many cases. That's why bears and humans can be totally to the vegan side and totally to the carnivore side. Bears are a very good example. You have the polar bear, almost 100% animal. Then you have the panda bear, nothing but bamboo. So, and then other bears are in between. Most bears are semi-vegetarian, by the way, and they're actually, what do you call it? They're like buzzards. They come and pick dead meat up after they get out. Then they go and eat sedges and grasses. So probably 90% of what a bear eats is vegetarian. But the bears that live the longest are the inland bears because the other ones have to survive on oily fish. And then they get in trouble. They lose a little bit of their lifespan. But they're stronger, so there's benefits. A fish is a good deal if you want to procreate because your sperm is a marine life, really. And then you have an egg. So we're made out of a sperm and an egg. And of course, in solar nutrition, those are nighttime foods. And circulation sex time is from 7 to 9 at night. Very convenient.
Yeah. Didn't you say a famous porn star consumed like multiple cans of sardines in between shoots?
Tuna. But he got those giant cans. What do you call them? Not the 8-ounce one, not the 16-ounce one, but the huge can that the restaurants buy. He would eat 3 of those. Yeah, and he could basically ejaculate every 10 minutes on demand for the camera. He was a phenomenon. I'd like to look up his name because I have a book, but I haven't been able. It didn't have an index, so I couldn't find the information.
That's hilarious. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, it seems like there's just a lot of context with the polyunsaturated fats, and since I like sell vitamin E, a lot of what I educate about is like I tell people the first 30 years of my life in Southern California, most of the foods I ate were cooked in canola oil and safflower oil or sunflower oil, and so for 3 decades of my life, I was just loading up with concentrated, highly unsaturated fats.
Yeah, a lot of people do. I fell for that back when I got out of high school too. That I was using safflower oil and different oils like that because they were heart healthy. And even though I was drinking over a quart of milk a day, about 2 quarts of milk a day for a long time, I felt guilty about it. I'd come home from work and say, "I'm just going to have 1 glass of milk." Yeah, one more. So I'd have a quart of milk before I ever went to bed on an ongoing basis.
Wow.
I'm still alive.
I don't know if I've asked you this before, but drinking, like I used to be semi-liquidarian. I used to like pound the blue-green algae for lunch for several years. And what I noticed is it can cause mineral imbalance, right? Because you're just flushing your minerals. I mean, if it's not in the drink that you're consuming, if it's, you can flush your sodium and potassium.
It can actually lose muscle mass because a lot of liquids make us over alkaline. I just heard Ray Pete in an interview. By the way, he knows that too. Apparently, that it can over alkalinize you. In his terminology, it's oxidizing. Like if you want to become alkaline, as a lot of people like to be alkaline, drink 2 quarts of any kind of liquid. It will alkalize you. Any kind, coffee, whatever you think is acidifying, water, whatever it is, you'll become alkaline very quickly, sometimes less than an hour. But if you want to acidify, since acidify is an anabolic structure, then to get urate back in your body, it takes 2 or 3 days to get that back. So you have to dehydrate yourself for 3 days to become more anabolic. And the acidic state is actually the anabolic state, and the alkaline state is the catabolic state. But we need to be catabolic because you have to get rid of your old cells to get new cells and redevelop them. So it's a process of anabolic, catabolic, metabolic. And that's what metabolism is. Those two forces going back and forth. Scientists forget. They want to stress this one or that one, acid or alkaline, both.
Wow. Yeah, yesterday I was listening to a keto podcast, and it was on, I think, copper or minerals, and the guy running the interview said, in the winter we're supposed to store body fat and be fatter in the winter and then and then slimmer in the summer. Do you subscribe to that, or do you think there's more to the story?
It actually it happens, but it's called the hibernation effect. And even though we don't hibernate, we have the genes for it, by the way, so we can. And Ray Pete doesn't approve of hibernation. I think there's a story for both of them. And yes, people tend to put on weight at that time because we have the hibernation genes in our body. Sometimes it's just a mild amount, and sometimes it's more. Sometimes the cold makes you hungrier, so you're going to go and eat more. Generally, in heat, people eat less or they eat differently. They eat different foods that crave. Like, it amazed me when I managed a health food store in Carpinteria. Guess when we sold the most ice cream? In the winter, on the coldest days, they would come in because they knew that, I guess instinctively, the fat would make them warmer.
Wow. Yeah, it's funny. I was going to the ice cream shop here where I live, and in the summer it's always packed. There's always a line, and then I would go there in the winter and there would be no line almost every time. It's just interesting, the psychology of most people. They're just looking to cool off.
Yeah, because the store I managed was on the beach, so in the summer you figure they buy all the ice cream, but they came in during the winter.
Interesting. Wow.
And of course, fat does have extra calories. It's got as many calories.
Yeah, that is interesting. Adam, I wanted to jump into copper. I need to buy your ebook. I haven't yet, but you just wrote. Was it a full ebook, not a mini one, all about copper?
Yeah, I'd say it's more.
43 pages.
I think it's $9.99.
Yeah.
Is it $9.99? No, it's $19.99. I guess we went. Susie's checking right now.
$19.99. I'm looking at it. Yeah, it's worth it.
I wrote a book called Cosmochemistry at one point that kind of was small amounts of all these minerals. And at one time, I wanted to extend them all into books. Selenium, iron, all of those elements, zinc. But, it takes time to do that. And so first I started with magnesium. Well, iodine, I guess, first, magnesium, and then I went into copper. And so I found things about copper that surprised me, actually. And one thing is that it's so important to us that we can be toxified by it and not harmed by it. you can eat up to 100 times the toxic level, and it really doesn't hurt most people. I guess if you do it for years and years, it will. But it's really not that toxic unless you have a hereditary problem, just like you can have hemosiderosis hereditary for iron. Then you have problems with Wilson disease and various things. But most people, humans especially, do well with it. Dogs don't do too well with excess copper. Humans seem to do really well with it.
Yeah, the guy that I had on my show, Jason Hommel, he found some studies. Like, he was basically saying they've never studied high dose copper, and they just set this arbitrary number, to not go over 10 milligrams. But he found studies showing like 20,000 milligrams doesn't cause, I think you have to get to 20,000 milligrams of copper in one dose to cause liver damage or to, cause some imbalances. But you can really high dose it. For me, what's really fascinating is its relationship with lipofuscin, because it seems, and I think you've written about this, how copper can be a component to lipofuscin, but I've also heard it can help. So it seems like there's a lot of nuance to it.
Well, when it forms the certain enzymes that require both copper and zinc, I think I forget the name of some of these enzymes, but there are enzymes that actually then fight lipofuscin. But when it's free form floating in the body, then it forms what they call basically oxidative chemicals, like free radicals. And so copper is one of them. However, since copper is less in our body, obviously iron is more likely to become the main villain. Manganese, too, which is not generally recognized. I was surprised that manganese is a component of Alzheimer's disease. Iron, copper is a minimum one. They used to think zinc was, but it turned out zinc was in there to defend it. So zinc has a little bit of a defense against lipofuscin and things. Copper goes back and forth. It can do good and it can do bad. It just depends on the circumstances and whatever else you're eating that promotes one way or the other.
That makes sense. Yeah, I was reading about copper. I found a study on like copper and the proteins it's bound to, and I think it was like 40 to 70% bound to ceruloplasmin protein. But copper can also be bound to like albumin, and I think there's a few more proteins. So
it's very universal. That's why plants do so well too. You can toxify your agricultural crop with a lot of minerals and have a bad crop. But copper, even plants are pretty good at detoxing themselves of it. So if they get extra, they just slough it off.
Wow. Adam, have you heard that lipofuscin is only, like, I found a study showing that only 2% of lipofuscin is iron, copper, zinc, aluminum, manganese. Like, I thought iron was like 50% of lipofuscin. I was kind of shocked to find it's only 2%. That's according to just a few studies of it.
No, it's true. There's barely any iron in it. But remember, some things in small amounts can cause a lot of damage. So, yeah, most of lipofuscin is either oils and it's proteins and it's different mixtures of other chemicals. But the main thing that aggravates it is the oil. The omega-3 oils are the only connection that makes it almost necessary. I've never found a connection with omega-6 and yellow fat disease. It's a good question to ask Ray Pete, because I was really surprised that after writing 14 books and doing a lot of research after, because obviously people ask me questions all the time, I couldn't find a single incidence of a direct connection between omega-6. Even Monsanto makes money on the difference. They feed farm fish low omega-3s and raise the omega-6s, and then they don't get yellow fat disease.
Yeah, you still have me on the sprouted nuts, especially the almonds. I feel great eating a handful every morning.
Really rich on vitamin E in them too. So. Yeah, there's also a complete mineral profile. When I studied with the Donald Lay, he told me that the name almond means all world because it has all the elements and all the minerals in it. And when I looked it up, I was amazed. All the other nuts were high in one and low in the other, but almonds right across the board, all heavy duty minerals in it. And almonds have almost none. Some accounts say no omega-3 fatty acids in it. I find that almost hard to believe, but they're very, very low in omega-3s. The polyunsaturated acids they do have are omega-6s or monounsaturated fats and a tiny bit of saturated fat.
Wow. Yeah, it seems to be the balance. It's interesting that unfermented, unfortified cod liver oil is about it's saturated, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated. And when we look at Kirkland fish oil or something, it's it's just 100% polyunsaturated fat, which we wouldn't really find isolated PUFAs like that in nature.
Not really, because even fat like mackerel, they have a lot of saturated fat in them too. And certain fatty fish. You don't hear much about the saturated fat content, but they have a lot of the polyunsaturated because certain parts of them have to be, it's like 10, 20, 30 oil. You have a different oil when you go up in the mountains than you do in the Death Valley.
Yeah. I think I've asked you this in previous shows, and I think I used Dr. Jack Kruse as an example, which I've met in person and seen his skin. But like a pescatarian diet, if you don't supplement fish oils or PUFA oils, you can still get lipofuscin just eating a lot of seafood, right? Especially combined with sunlight.
You can, definitely. A lot of it. Now, so I've been called the anti-Jack Kruse. I admire the guy. He's a smart guy. I just disagree with most of what he says. But recently he wrote something about the time clock, and I found on Ray Peat's site, and it was brilliant. The guy is really sharp. I just disagree with him on a lot of things having to do with PUFA and the idea that his contention is DHA has been around for 60,000 years. Well, so has cyanide, even longer than that. There's a lot of other things that have been around. So just because poison oak has been around for so many years doesn't mean I want to go eat it. So,
yeah, that's a good point. I look at a lot of these people in that club, that tribe or whatever you want to call it, and they're like megadosing seafood and combining that with equator strength sunlight, and it just seems like it's rapidly aging the skin. I noticed there's lately on social media there's a trend to vehemently, aggressively defend sunbathing, but it's almost this message the more the better. If you're not tan, you're unhealthy. Tanning is more, a tan body is more attractive. All this messaging, but it's wait, what about people in northern latitudes that don't want to vacation to Mexico 4 times a year to sunbathe, right? To keep their tan or whatever. It's really interesting, the sunlight kind of religious sunlight worshipers, where they're kind of, they don't seem to be taking into context things like PUFAs or lipofuscin, or even genetics. Right? I'm 99% European. I know my ancestors didn't get sunlight for maybe half the year, maybe their entire life, right?
It makes a difference. Yeah, saying like they do that you can get as much sunlight as you want, like Jack Kruse has been prone to say, is like saying, okay, I'm out in the cold. Now I'm going to turn the thermostat up to 76. Well, that's nice. So it must be better if I put it at 120. Oh, that's really comfortable, 120. It makes the same amount of sense. You can overdo it. The sun rules us. I mean, we get photosynthesis out of it. We get vitamin D, testosterone, and a lot of chemicals they don't give us credit for getting out of it, because we have a fourth nervous system called the adrenal dermal nervous system That's one of the autonomic nervous systems, the fourth missing one. I always wondered why you would have a parasympathetic, a sympathetic one, then you would have an enteric one. Well, where was its mate? Because the enteric one is obviously akin to the parasympathetic. Where is the sympathetic one? In the skin. The adrenal medulla, the bulk of it, 99% of the adrenal medulla is not in the little pyramid on top of the kidneys like they picture it. It's actually in the skin, in every cell that has tyrosine and phenylalanine in it.
Wow. Yeah, it's funny that I like that you highlight vitamin D supplementation so much in your posts, because I do that too, and telling people like, hey, what about the molecules that you make from light that you don't get from a pill or a liquid D3 supplement, right? Like lumisterol, tachysterol. There's all these like free metabolites that form just from ultraviolet light. I mean, people just hyper focus on the D3, but there's so many other molecules.
Yeah, they tend the original vitamin D that they got the patent on, I think in 1933, I believe, basically was limited, because how come if it wears down in our body or it wears down in other things, how come it'll stay in a pill for years? That makes no sense when you really think about it, because they stabilize it into something that isn't vitamin D anymore. Now, some people actually claim you need vitamin D every day because it breaks down. But that's nonsense, because why would nature leave us hanging in the winter? When winter came, we couldn't get any vitamin D or have it accessible to us. But it still does have a shelf life. If you store if you take olive oil out in the sun and give it 20 minutes of exposure, you'll pack it with enough vitamin D where it won't start depressing for 10 months under optimum conditions. You keep it in a cool spot, keep it in a colored bottle, a green bottle, a brown bottle, whatever, and then it'll stay. But it starts to break down after that. You have a certain limit. But how come a pill doesn't break down? You're not getting what people think. It's not vitamin D, but it does change some of the levels in your blood, but not in your body, and it's not usable. I know people taking 50,000 IU of that type of vitamin D. They're not raising their vitamin D at all.
Wow. Yeah, this summer I decided I'm going to experiment with your olive oil trick. And when I used to sell algae oil, I think you knew me back then, I had it in Myron glass bottles. And my bright idea, pun intended, was to put it in the sun, which I would do, to load up the DHA, the double bonds with photons or whatever. But I think the better way to do it, which I'm going to try this summer, is olive oil in Myron glass, because Myron, the violet glass, has a unique ability to only allow in UV and infrared, and it blocks all other wavelengths. So it's an interesting kind of window.
Yeah, and different foods have different results. Ironically, if you take a food in nature, growing green like barley out in the field, it doesn't have much vitamin D in it until it dries out. Now, dried out, it doesn't have it, but now if you expose the barley to sunlight for 20 minutes, you pack it with vitamin D that it didn't have. Because people wonder, well, why do you have to put vitamin D in olive oil? Because it's not there. Because if you leave the olive oil in the sun for 24 hours, guess what happens? It's rancid, and there's no vitamin D in it. You destroyed it all. If you keep olive oil out in the direct sunlight, midday sun, more than an hour, it starts to go the other way. You lose vitamin D. 20 minutes to 30 minutes is ideal for olive oil. It's hard for people to understand that pasta can get more vitamin D in it than you can from where it comes from in the field, from wheat or rye or whatever you're going to make your pasta out of, or rice.
Wow. Yeah, my friend Jordan keeps sending me this, he said it's the only glyphosate free pasta in the world. I guess that's why a lot of people have intolerances to wheat, right? Is the glyphosate part.
That and other breeding things that they've done. It's just like, go figure this. Why don't the Chinese have problems with peanuts? Why don't they have allergies? Why don't the Africans? But why do Americans do? It's a processing. And even now, before glyphosate, which is greatly exaggerated, by the way, there's other chemicals that are added to the glyphosate that are even more powerful, but it's the way they process it. And they don't want to tell people that. It's now, I'm sure they're starting to get peanut allergies in Africa and China now because they're using our type of processing.
Yeah, back in my raw vegan days, I was eating a lot of the jungle peanuts. I was all about heirloom and no hybridized, and then I quickly realized that it's very restrictive to not eat any hybridized food.
Definitely, definitely. You know, a lot of people don't know that they've changed soy even in this country. They genetically altered soy in 1888 because when they first brought it over here, they brought it over for parts for Fords. And then they found out that it would destroy beta carotene in grain. So they had this red wheat. They didn't want to sell us red bread. So they made white bread by just simply adding soy to the mix. And soy was used to that, then to destroy the beta carotene. But it was in the 30s that they wondered, would it do that to retinol, to vitamin A? Yes. If you eat soy with vitamin A, it destroys 99% of the vitamin A, according to a 1937 edition of Scientific American.
Wow. Have you heard, Adam, that to convert beta carotene to retinol, which is like the active form of vitamin A, that requires copper? I thought that was pretty fascinating.
I'm sure it does. There's several things that do involve the conversion, and copper has more enzymes than any other element. I may be incorrect like that, but I think copper is the leading of the pack. It has God, I've even forgotten the name of the systems now, but it has a whole bunch of systems, and you can name dozens and dozens of enzymes that require the protein. God, I'm pronouncing it wrong. That whole system that involves enzymes is part of copper.
Wow. Yeah. And jumping topics maybe a little bit, but I like your posts, whatever you post about hyperbaric oxygen therapy, because I've been into that for the last couple years. And I think you said it could cause seizures in someone that's deficient in, it was CO2 and something else.
Vitamin E. You can have seizures if you're low in vitamin E in a hyperbaric chamber. I just found that out recently. I knew about the carbon dioxide, but the E surprised me. I just found that out a few days ago, that low in vitamin D, seizure danger. But hyperbaric, hyperbaric, my buddy George Wellington Adams was a pioneer in hyperbaric chamber because back in maybe the 1800s, so late 1800s to the Second World War, they had hyperbaric therapy was used a lot. They even had a 4-story hyperbaric hospital in St. Louis. And I mean, it was all pressurized. The entire hospital was under pressure. So they did all the stuff under pressure. It was sponsored by multimillionaires. It was a big thing. Along comes the Second World War. They broke it down for parts for tanks and artillery and whatever else they needed. And it never came back till my friend George Wellington Adams, who was a deep sea diver, actually trained some of the astronauts in pools, weightless type things. He brought it back into fashion, working with Bethesda, Maryland, the Navy deal there at San Antonio, became centers of hyperbaric. But he didn't even know that you need carbon dioxide to prevent brain damage. For all of the good it does, normally, a little bit of carbon dioxide added to it would save so many more lives and not have the brain damage that is written about in Scientific American recently, that how oxygen does tear up brain cells under hyperbaric conditions. Just adding 2% of carbon dioxide something they knew back in 1910 when they pumped oxygen into mines. They always made sure they had at least 2 or 3%. I think it was 3% carbon dioxide there. That's all you need. Higher amounts can be used for certain therapies, and all you need is something called carbogen, which is any hospital can buy, but almost none uses it. Almost, it's close to less than 1% of hospitals.
Wow. Yeah, if my lake was deeper here, it's only about, I think, 10 or 12 feet deep. If it was 20 or 30, I thought it would be cool to build like a underwater little chamber to hang out in. Pump some oxygen and CO2 in there.
Would be perfect. Now, if you're going to get hyperbaric, you could breathe slowly. In fact, they have a new thing now. They refuse to use the word carbon dioxide because they don't want it to come out. But in the latest hyperbaric chambers, they take you on and off it so that you will be starved for oxygen so that you can breathe even better and get more results. Basically, it's carbon dioxide, but they won't call it that. They call it the hypoxic double effect or some fancy name now.
Yeah, there's one called like HIF, hypoxia inducible factor, that I think that goes up after you get out of the chamber because your body is tricked into thinking that it's deprived of oxygen because you were just at a higher oxygen percent. And that seems to have like a lot of interesting effects on the body, like activating genes and different things.
Yeah, in fact, that's what they use inside now. They bring it in and out, back and forth. So you go back and forth because obviously oxygen, you don't breathe with oxygen. Carbon dioxide is the regulator that makes you breathe and drives the oxygen in deeper into your cells. Otherwise, under hyperbaric chamber, you don't drive it in as deep until you add the carbon dioxide. Then it goes way past the capillary into each individual cell. Under 2 atmospheric pressure, the equivalent of 33 feet of diving, you don't need any red blood cells anymore, not a single one. So they actually do this for bloodless surgery in mostly in New Jersey. The most bloodless surgery goes on in New Jersey, where they don't even bother to have blood there. You show up and they use hyperbaric chambers, they use diet, they use a whole bunch of things. No blood needed.
Wow. Speaking of blood, I think you made a post recently. I love your controversial post because you write something and then it's just this really long thread of people saying, wait, what about this? What about that? And one of them was about, I think it was blood donation and, bloodletting you were talking about. And I recently donated, it was like a month and a half ago. And it was kind of like a religious experience for me. Like I felt less sensitive to my Starlink router. Like I felt like I could sleep with the Starlink router as my pillow and I would have slept the best of my life. And I did sleep. I had the best night's sleep of my life after I donated a pint of blood. So it does seem to have some effect, but I'm just curious your thoughts in general on donating blood. And we're not talking about Red Cross because I think you mentioned what they use blood for is kind of weird, right?
They use it for all kinds of different things, and I object to it because they put you in the system. It's part of the way to get you there and say, oh, you got this problem with your blood, now you got to take this medicine, that kind of thing. So basically, now with what's going on the last 2 years, I won't mention it to not get us in any trouble. But now they can identify people that way. They're not going to need the blood quite as much. Because believe me, they claim they do not have synthetic blood. They do. But you won't come in to see them otherwise. If they just have a synthetic blood, you're not going to come in to donate blood. But donating blood and losing blood can be beneficial. Now, here's a funny thing. If you're younger and give it to an older person, you're making them younger. But if you're older and giving blood and give it to a younger person, you're making them older. This is an old trick that they knew about. You've heard about people drinking adrenochrome and supposedly Peter Thiel drinking the blood of young virgins and all that stuff. There is actually a market in young people's blood that they do drink blood. That's why blood is forbidden in some religions, but it was used when when I was a kid, I was fed the blood. You would have a big roast lamb, and they give me the whole plate. I'd drink down about a quart of blood right there. I believe Jack LaLanne, though he was a vegetarian in various times of the years, he went into a blood diet for a year or so.
Wow, I've never heard that. That's interesting. Yeah, it makes me think of fecal implants. I think recently Dave Asprey made a post about that, saying how powerful that could be to, reset someone's intestines.
Yep. The intestines are very quickly reset, by the way. All you have to do is change your diet, and you get a completely different intestines that quickly. So with people that have intestinal problems, they could experiment. If they're carnivore, go vegan. If they're vegan, go carnivore. If they have a disease, it might just clear up from doing that alone. If scientists used to think it would take maybe months, maybe even years to reset after you change diets, it turned out it was in 3 days.
Wow. I just recently started eating salads again, because I would only eat them maybe once a month when I ate out for the last maybe 2 or 3 years. And then I started making them at home recently, like every day. And it's, local greens, and I do like olive oil, apple cider vinegar, salt. Are you a fan of salads? Going fiber free really messed me up. Like the raw carrot was not enough. It threw off my bowel movements completely to lower my fiber intake.
I don't do Susie does the raw carrot and the olive oil and everything. It agrees with her. I don't do it, but I think it has value, and I think salads can. Of course, salads are the devil to vegetarians, that you can't eat them because they have all the toxins in them. I see sometimes people really do have intestinal problems from eating salads. I've seen it, and there are warnings about it. If a person's having diarrhea and various conditions, then they should go easy on it. But I think the healthiest salads are coming from the fruit-dough vegetable, like tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchini, yellow crookneck squash, pumpkin, all of those, because they're basically fruit, and the plant is basically saying, here's my fruit. Eat it, so you spread the seeds around the ground. But when you eat the greens, it's like, here's the fruit, and you say, I prefer to eat your arm than the food you're handling me. So plants get kind of aggressive about that. However, I think the seeds before they're sprouted are probably more toxic than the salad greens. And Ray Peat claims that the roots are less. You have to really cook down the roots even more than the greens to eat them safely. If you ever try to eat a raw taro or root, you could be in serious trouble and die from eating that. And some of the other roots have a lot more toxins than like a raw potato is not good for you, but it's not going to kill you usually if you eat a raw potato. But if you eat some of the other tapioca, some of the other ones out in South America, you could die.
Wow. Yeah, in honor of our interview last night, I had potatoes with butter and salt, and my potatoes were kind of slightly sprouted. And I think you said that's not an issue, right? As long as they're not like fully sprouting.
Yeah, even if the sprouts, if you just cut the sprouts off, you're usually going to be okay. If they're green inside, it is poisonous, but it's not as poisonous as people make out. But we cut away the green parts anyway, just to be sure. People have gone to the hospital from eating the green of a potato, but they really aren't that many deaths from it. They usually save their lives, and usually if they stayed home, they would have had a bellyache for a few days and get well anyway.
Wow, isn't it like solanine? Is that what it's called?
That's the main one. There's some offshoots also, but that is the main green producer. Yep, and it is a poison. It's just not as deadly to us. Some other animals that kill them a lot quicker than we do.
Wow, I wonder how that compares to like cyanide. Like recently, Jim Stevenson, he's like anti-vitamin D supplementation guy. He told me about the cyanide cookbook, It was going through all the foods that contain cyanide, the benefits of it.
Cyanide can have some benefits. It's in the nitrogen high diet. It's not nitric oxide, but other forms of pre-proteins and proteins. And what was the name of the product now that they had? Amygdalin. Amygdalin actually has some value. I think it's overblown, but I used to eat the seeds out of umeboshi plums and out of prunes and apple seeds and things like that. I don't anymore, but it never seemed to hurt me by doing that. So I think a little bit of it's okay. And by the way, if you have cyanide poisoning, the antidote is selenium. And selenium is actually the core of vitamin E. They don't tell you that. It's actually the core. You'll find without selenium being around vitamin E is not going to work. It's tocopherols by themselves then.
Wow. Maybe that's why I've been craving salmon, because we get pretty fresh seafood, up way here, far north Idaho. And we get pretty fresh seafood a couple times a week. And so I wonder if I'm craving the selenium.
It's possible. It's good to find out the selenium in your soil, because the thing is that plants don't need selenium at all. They don't care. They detoxify it and store it, but they store it. And as we as human beings come along and eat it. Now, if we ate cows and drank milk in North Dakota, we could die from selenium poisoning. But if we went down to Missouri and we ate cows and drank milk down there, we could die from lack of selenium. So what they generally do is take the both of them, they ship them to a common point, ship them back mixed, and then the cows in Dakotas are happy, and the ones in Missouri are happy too, because nobody dies. Otherwise, actually, before you ate the cows in Dakotas, the cow would die, so you would know before you ate
it. Interesting. Have you looked into boron, Adam? Because I've been kind of playing with supplementing it, and I used to take like borax internally and then put 20 mule team borax in my baths. I've actually been doing, because I have so much raw goat milk, I don't know what to do with it. I've been doing goat milk foot baths since I don't have a bathtub right now. And I actually feel a benefit from that, just soaking up the milk. But just curious if you had any thoughts on boron, because that it's an interesting mineral, like not talked about too much.
It's necessary for strong bones, and I believe it is in goat's milk and other places. And if you want it as a food, it's the mucilaginous foods like banana, okra, things like that. When it's mucilaginous, it has it. Also, some seeds and some fruit has boron. If you eat whole foods, it's pretty easy to get. If you eat at McDonald's, it's hard to get.
Yeah, it makes sense. Let's see, where can we go from here? Oh, I wanted to say on the topic of anti-nutrients, because you were talking about salads and anti-petarian. And it's interesting because the carnivores often speak out against oxalates, phytates, and lectins. And I found that all of those block iron absorption, which, there's non-heme and heme, but it's generally a good thing, in my opinion, to block iron absorption. Just something that we accumulate that we can't get rid of. And so to me, that's a huge benefit of those three, quote, anti-nutrients.
There are benefits to phytates. There are benefits to oxalates and lectins. There actually are benefits because they knew once upon a time that excess minerals cause aging, because the minerals are the brakes for us, and the life force is in the part that escapes the pot. When the chef puts a lid on the pot, he keeps the volatile acids from leaving. The alkalis, which are generally the minerals, sink to the bottom of the pot. Now you need both, because without the brakes, if you had a car with no brakes, that would not be practical. But the go part The energy part is actually the acidic fraction of food, and that involves the proteins, sulfur, not sulfur, but some of the other elements that are acidic. Sulfur, by the way, often is said to be acidic, but it's actually alkalizing, very alkalizing, because it's in the oxygen level of the periodic table. It oxidizes. Sulfur and selenium oxidizes too. So if you have a growth of a cancer, both selenium and sulfur will stop it. But if you have a spreading cancer or metastasizing, it will actually increase its metastasis.
Wow. So would you say like coffee is like life force in a cup, concentrated?
I think it's a miracle nutrient because here's the strange thing. It leaves you neutral. One of the few things in the body that is actually neutralizing to the body. In fact, Ravisi, I think, only mentioned 2 items. The second one escapes me. When you get acids or whatever alkalines in your urine, but think about it. How can coffee be acidic if it's an alkali? I mean, it has caffeine, which is an alkali, an alkaloid, even an alkaloid. Alkaloids are alkalizing, obviously. Otherwise, they would have named them acyloids. but it all neutralizes in your body, so coffee goes through you. The term acids, by the way, means pop or tartness or the taste of a coffee is where it comes from. It has nothing to do with pH, and yet I've seen chemists get mistaken by that if they simply look up a coffee and see what does acidic mean, you'll see it's tartness, pop, the taste sparkle. They have different names for it that you get. But it's nothing to do with pH whatsoever.
It does seem like coffee and orange juice have a effect on the enamel and like the teeth. Like, I'm curious if you and Vibrant Gal do anything, since you're like me. I mean, we both consume orange juice and coffee. Like I swish with pearl powder, usually 2 or 3 times a day, which is kind of a pricey way to do it. I mean, it's only, I don't know, half a teaspoon each time. But I'm curious, besides just swishing with water, if you guys do anything to protect your teeth from orange juice and coffee.
We just we drink our orange. We take whole oranges and take them by themselves usually. I'm not into the repeat thing of combining oranges with things, except for the case of almonds. Almonds, for some reason, just seem to go with it. And even though it's a protein, it doesn't interfere with its digestion. Almonds are kind of a miracle food. With coffee, Vibrant Gal only has a cup of it. I drink probably close to a quart of it a day, and I've even increased my amount of sugar now. I'm probably up to a couple of cups a day because we now take kefir, not necessarily for the colon, but it's a high protein source. So since we're not eating much meat, no meat at this point, it's a good source. You get 12 grams of protein out of 1 cup of kefir. So once I realized that, we started buying kefir. Now I mix it with sugar, half and half, and we are now experimenting. We're going to eat a lot more than we did. We're taking thyroid medication. We're taking pregnenolone. We're taking progesterone and DHEA. So we're doing the peak thing and see what happens.
Wow, that's fun. Yeah, I've played with all of that, and mostly the transdermal, like the progesterone cream and DHEA cream, and that seemed to be better for me than the oral forms. Like that. I think when you can, it's nice to do the transdermal because it seems to be digested easier. I mean, at least certain things.
It seems to work better for the local areas, like you have a local lesion, but it doesn't absorb much until you get it to at least the lips. But the stuff tastes really bad. We take a product recommended by Ray Peat called Progest-E. He claims that E is very digestible in E, and that it actually brings it out so that you can absorb it. Otherwise, it's hard to absorb. So we're using his product, but it tastes terrible. trying to find various things to disguise it, like mustard or whatever the heck I'm going to take it with. Whatever it is, I have to be careful because I'm going to lose the taste for the other thing that I'm going to take it with.
Yeah, I think I got that one a couple of years ago, and I think in one go I took maybe like 20% of the bottle, and I didn't feel too much. It was just kind of an experiment.
By the way, for lipofuscin, I found this really interesting.
Sorry, go ahead, Adam.
With the lag there. Ray Peat was talking about, they did experiments by packing vitamin E in alcohol, but then they found out that the alcohol worked for lipofuscin just as well as the E, as long as you took no more than a teaspoon of alcohol, that it could actually get rid of some lipofuscin and dissolve it out of your inner cells, not just your skin. Previously, he had said you could rub gin or something on your skin and get rid of some age spots if they weren't there too long and too well established. But recently, he said that if you take it internally, they found out that the alcohol by itself, now small amounts, because despite what they say about a glass of wine helping digestion, it doesn't. That was proven 200 years ago by Dr. William Beaumont, that alcohol does not help digestion at all. But if you take it as a medicine by itself in a spoonful, which I'm experimenting with now, you can get rid of lipofuscin inside your body.
Wow. Yeah, you just reminded me to buy some vodka because my friend Jennifer sent me something that you could actually absorb vitamin A better with I think it was like half a shot of vodka. So it seems like there's this relationship with the fat soluble vitamins and alcohol. Pretty fascinating.
There is definitely for the fat soluble vitamins. Yeah. We do sometimes pineapple juice, tequila, and aloe. I'm experimenting with plain alcohol now. But by the way, in defense of Jack Kruse, he has a lot of age spots on his skin. But people assume that means his liver is going to be like that too. But no, he abuses the skin by being out in the sun. That attracts lipofuscin to that area. His liver might be clean as a whistle. We don't know until we go in and actually take a biopsy of his liver. So to be fair, he's not totally dying of lipofuscinosis by having that. Who's your friend?
Right. This is my co-host here. Yeah, I love that you guys love cats. By the way, all the cat health tips are awesome. I need to get them back on vitamin E.
Yeah, we take care of our.
But yeah,
our landlords go on tour, we take care of the cats, and they kind of like us now. We use a stick and stick them. You rub them with a stick, and they love it. They crave it. They come whining at the door, meowing that we got to come out and stick them, or they get angry at us.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend yesterday about like he was saying he can communicate with his cats telepathically, and it's funny because I feed them wet and dry food, and I don't have any sort of schedule with the wet food. Maybe generally like first thing in the day, end of the day, but they'll just kind of look at me. They don't even meow. They'll just give me a certain look, and I know that they want the wet food. It's kind of funny. I think Ray said he talks to his cats. He can like non-verbally communicate with them.
He actually said they understand English. He says he talks to them in English. He said he bet his girlfriend that, and he could direct them for English to go certain places and everything. You know, frankly, I think Ray is a yogi. You know, he's able to affect machinery if he walks up to it, including cloud chambers, electrical switches, all kinds of things. This guy is a yogi in disguise.
I definitely respect him. Yeah, I think like you, we don't agree like on the vitamin D supplementation thing and a lot of points, but it doesn't mean you can't respect someone. And I think that's the message that I'm trying to share just in general on this podcast and whatever. It's just like, we don't have to agree 100% with each other to be respectful to each other, you know?
No, we cherry pick from Ray Peat, quite frankly, but
Hmm.
When I first, in 2015, I was falling apart, frankly. I had edema, which had started a few years before minorly, and my right leg, it's always about a woman with me, it swelled up like really large. And I thought I was on the way out. Also, I started getting petechia and purpura. They're those blood spots that come. They say they can be really serious, especially on a male, I think more than even a female. So I started getting those in the 90s. And then I had to blot my butt. I couldn't wipe it. I had to wet the toilet paper to wipe my butt to keep from bleeding. I had bleeding gums. A whole bunch of things were just falling apart. And I was very distressed about it. When I gave up tuna and mayo and went to oranges, and I think kale and sugar and salt were a lot of that too, completely since 2015, my ankles are the same size. And even when I didn't have edema, my right was slightly larger because I've had some accidents to that side, went down to normal. No more patera. No, I could wipe my butt with sandpaper now. Before, if I took a slice of orange and put it against my teeth, there'd be blood spots on it. Now I can take it and pound the orange on my teeth, no blood spots. I had several other problems, like a frozen left leg. It wouldn't go down into a cross-legged situation. A month after giving up the tuna and mayo and doing whatever else I was doing, kale, whatever, I could go into a lotus posture again. Well, a semi-lotus posture. I never could do a lotus posture unless I was fasting for 3 days, which I don't do anymore.
Wow. Sorry, my cat knocked the mic. There we go. Fix it. So you mentioned kale. That's fascinating because kale gets a lot of hate by the carnivores right now. I mean, they're anti all plants. And I used to, before I started making my own kale chips, I was buying a ton of it, in the yeast cheese, and then I started dehydrating it myself and making it. Do you think there's health benefits to kale? Like you're saying it actually helped you?
I think the kale was a big step. We do it, like Ray Pete says, 3 or 4 hours of cooking. And we also do not only the beets, but the beet greens too, and some of those things. And we overcook them. Like back in the day, you used a crock pot like that. I had a friend of mine had a crock pot on 24 hours a day. He was eating some beans that were cooked for 12 hours or 14 hours or even overnight. So a lot of people get shocked when you find out you're cooking something for 3 or 4 hours, and it's really delicious. And I mix it with various other things. I even dextrinize my raw tomatoes sometimes in the oven you put it in a low heat, and it makes it more absorbable and more like a power food.
Wow. I'll have to add kale to my list of things to grow in my geodesic dome.
They call it angry lettuce.
Oh. Adam, I'm curious, do you know about cherry angiomas? I asked people today, I did like a poll on social media, and like 90% of people said either they had it or they knew someone that had it. And some people said, it's from the jab the last 2 years. But I guess it's these little red spots that show up on the skin, cherry angiomas. Have you looked into those? I guess Georgi Dinkoff said he had them, and he thought it was prolactin excess. So he said by lowering his prolactin, they went away. And when you Google it, it seems like it's one of those conditions where they say we don't know what causes it.
True. They always seem to say that they don't have a reason for it. I forget their term for it, but basically we don't know what it is, and it can't be cured. And then someone comes and cures it. When I was a therapist, I never came across people who really wanted me to look at that. So I don't know much about them, except I know diet does have a factor. And sometimes they can be formed by Ray Pete brought out an interesting thing. When you get jabbed by a needle, it actually is a trauma in itself, because we have a wiring in our body for bee stings, and something comes along and stings us, we don't like it. So you kind of get an unconscious autonomic shock syndrome from just getting a needle with nothing in it. So a lot of times when people get a lot of needles, they actually can cause skin problems where the needle is. And heaven forbid if they get that needle in an acupuncture point, they can set off something that lasts for
Wow.
years.
That makes sense. Wow. Yeah, when I gave blood, it was kind of traumatic because the woman was inexperienced, and she told me that, and it just, that red flag went right over my head. And when she stuck my right arm, she said, "Uh-oh." And I said, "Uh-oh, what?" And she said, "I think I went through the vein." So the experienced woman came over, and then she's like, "Yeah, you did." So they pulled it out, and then she's like, "Okay, put pressure on it." And then the more experienced woman stuck my other arm, and the pain was like 100 times worse. Like I was grimacing for 2 or 3 seconds. It was like a 9 out of 10 pain scale. And yeah, giving blood's definitely, it's just, I mean, yeah, maybe it's the needle part, but it's not fun for sure.
You know, a person who really
yeah.
knows how to take blood, you wouldn't feel pain.
Yeah, it almost made me want to learn how to do it myself. Like I think Dr. Mercola does self phlebotomy, but I just wouldn't want to bleed out at home, on accident.
Also, a lot of medical people won't listen to you. Like I had a strange phenomenon back when I used to go to doctors and hospitals. I had this strange fever, so I kept going to the hospital to be examined. Well, of course, they want to take your blood. And every time they come to my right arm, I said, "You can't get blood out of that arm." "Oh, yeah, we can. That's okay." I said, "Can you take it out of my left? Because I'm telling you, you won't get it out of the right." "Oh, we can do it." So they fumble around, they stick it in about after 5 or 6 times when I'm needled all up. I say, "Oh, I guess so." And they come out and do my left. Now I'm angry because I told you so, because they never could get it out of my right arm.
Wow. Why is that, do you think?
I have no idea. To this day, I have no idea. But the left, it was easy. One poke, they had it. And that happened all the time. But they won't listen to the person who's it brings their own body to them, They won't believe that this has happened to them, and they have to do it their own way because they're habituated to do it out of their right arm instead of the left for whatever reason. But I found a lot of things when I had that. I had so many bad experiences that it made me very down on doctors. And finally, to cure my problem, I told the doctor how to do it and said, since I can't get this sputum up in the hospital, I've been in here twice now, and you've cut out my appendix as a possible thing that didn't work. Since the sputum only comes when I'm going to work in the morning, it's bright green. Can I just take it to a lab instead of go to a hospital? "Oh, yeah, why don't you do that?" So then the sputum had a strep throat and something else. And then he gave me a choice. "Do you want 3 months off or blood transfusion?" Duh, that was very easy. I took 3 months off. I came back, still had the problem. "You want more months off or you want a blood transfusion?" 3 more months. My job let me go, of course, at that point. And then I went on unemployment. And after 9 months of holiday, basically I got better.
Wow. Wow. My favorite job story you ever told was the cannabis one, because most people, think marijuana makes you lazy, but it actually increased your productivity. You said, and you kept the job.
They said they'd never seen such an improvement in a person's work before, and now I was their best employee. and would you please stay? And I said no, because I have another opportunity now. That's how I got to Texas from there. But anyway, they said, well, if you ever come back, the job is open for you anytime.
That's awesome. Yeah, the one study the most interesting study I've ever heard on cannabis is how it increases pregnenolone in the brain by 5,000%. It was like 4,000 to 5,000%. That blew my mind. I don't know if that's like a protective mechanism.
I think you can get too much because it's estrogenic, and it does cause lung cancer if you keep persisting at it, and even cirrhosis of the liver and things related to other chemicals. But as a medicine, I think it's ideal for certain things. I've used it from time to time in the small amounts, and it works great. I used to do it quite a lot back in the hippie days, of course, and a lot of LSD and all kinds of other chemicals. After I discovered LSD, who needs pot anymore for for showtime?
Yeah, didn't you say? I think you had a story on Facebook about LSD and like a club. There's like armed guards or something. It was a wild story.
It was an unbelievable club. My friend, who was totally straight, didn't take any drugs. He got hooked up with a guy who had got out of prison, and they worked for Texas Instruments. And he talked my friend into starting a psychedelic nightclub. So they had a electronic floor that lit up, and all the walls lit up and everything. And basically, gangsters moved in, all kinds of drug abuse and everything. And I took a lot of drugs in that place, and I was made the night watchman. Here I am, high as a kite, running around with a gun. God help anybody who came in that place. And I'm pretending I'm a military guy, crawling on my belly across the nightclub floor and everything like that. Yeah, it was a wild place. Though. We had gangsters. One guy offered his newly brother-in-law, "Who do you want me to kill for your wedding present?" That kind of stuff went on there. Yeah, it was one of the wildest places I've ever worked at, and I was there on and off for 2 or 3 jobs. Every time I needed a job, I'd hitchhike back to Texas and work in the Night House Club in Nederland, Texas, in the middle of nowhere.
Wow. Yeah, you've definitely had more interesting jobs than I have. The most interesting story I have is almost being crushed by a whole pallet of dog food that almost fell on me in a pet food store.
Yikes! Yikes!
Barely missed it.
Did you ever do anything?
The forklift. Oh, go ahead, sir.
Wow. Did you ever do anything professionally with your scuba diving? Because you scuba dive too, didn't you?
Yeah, I thought about being an instructor, and if I would have gone that route, I probably wouldn't have started this podcast. It just sounded fun and like a fun way, to make money, but pretty labor intensive. I mean, I interacted with a bunch of scuba instructors, and it just seemed, they would sometimes have 2 or 3 classes a day, and it taxes the body just going down and up multiple times. I mean, I saw it that it would kind of stress their body a little bit. But fun hobby. I really miss it. Being, fairly close to Seattle, I want to go over there and do some dives. I think it'll be a lot colder than San Diego, but probably worth it.
A lot colder than San Diego too.
Yeah. I didn't like the dry suit because I did that once, and it kind of feels like you're just walking into a freezer. Versus with like a wetsuit or a semi-dry suit, you're warmer because at least you have water inside that's like keeping you warm, versus just being dry. But
yeah.
Did you ever get into scuba diving, Adam?
Once I went down, they took me down illegally because for various reasons I was supposed to get certified. It never happened for very strange things that happened. So one day I was in Hawaii and they said, well, let's go down anyway. So the dive master took me down for about a half hour, and it was really cool. Otherwise, I just snorkeled while the rest of the bunch were diving. My friend Greg Whiteley, who lives up near you, he probably has more footage than Cousteau's son did. And he's actually won film awards in competition with Cousteau's son. He did a lot of diving with sharks, with every type of animal in the world, all around from the Galapagos Island to the Red Sea to the Great Barrier Reef to Palau to all over the place. He's been. Yeah, he's quite a diver.
Wow.
Now he's a farmer in Idaho.
Wow. Yeah, diving with sharks is something I really want to do because they're such fascinating animals. I'm sure I've been around one without knowing. I think we all have, but to consciously be around them. I think I've swam in La Jolla, California, with the tiger sharks. I think those are the ones that are fairly docile. I think I snorkeled with
Oh,
those.
tiger sharks are not
But
docile.
maybe I'm thinking of a different one then. Yeah, these were like bottom feeders. Forget the name.
Yeah, a lot of them are pretty much friendly. A tiger shark is the one that took that girl's leg off that was surfing in Kauai. We used to go to that beach there, and they are very dangerous. And
Wow.
one time when they were night diving, I snorkeled, not realizing how dangerous it was at night to be out there with no light, with everybody else below. And finally, because the wind was in the right direction, I heard the dive master said, "That guy's crazy. You'd never have me do that this time of night." And so I swam really quickly back to the boat, and that was the end of my night snorkeling.
Yeah, it's freaky. All the shark attack videos I've seen, it's just like it's usually an exploratory bite, and it's rare that they'll just keep coming back to take the person out. They'll usually just take one bite and go off.
That often happens. There was a case in Australia where dolphins saved the surfer's life. 4 of them got on each side of the surfing board and took them into shore. Amazing, amazing the different things connections we have with animals. You know.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think that's why I mostly interact with people way more than, or I mostly interact with animals way more than people. Just it's more enjoyable, more peaceful.
True. Haven't had 5 ex-wives. I agree.
I love it. So I want to circle back out of kind of jumping topics here, back to what you said when we were talking about almonds. Just last thing with that. So that might change my morning routine based on what you say here, because I've been doing first thing in the morning, fresh squeezed orange juice, coconut water, and salt. And I just feel really good on that, like adrenal cocktail, it's called. But are you saying I could have my sprouted almonds with that and it wouldn't compete? Like that would digest fine to have the almonds with the orange juice?
Apparently so, because that's one thing Donald Lay told us, because all the minerals are in there, that it actually helps the digestion, and it's the only one that will actually go with orange juice, according to him. And he had something in Solar Nutrition, if I can remember the minerals. He said there were 12 basic minerals: potassium, phosphorus, iron, fluorine, sulfur, sodium, silicon, magnesium, manganese, and carbon, calcium, and chlorine. He said those were the basic 12 solar minerals, and they were all in an almond. And actually, a lot of the trace elements were too, and you could not find that in any other nut or even food on the planet, according to him, except a human being and a mammal. I'm sure.
Wow, the carbon's interesting because every month or two I'll have someone talk about C60 to me, carbon 60, the Buckminster fullerene, and I used to take it and I stopped. The one study I saw of 90% lifespan increase just seemed a little sketchy to me and really like marketing. So I stopped. But it seems like carbon's in a lot of things, right? Like I wonder if we need to concentrate it necessarily.
I haven't experimented with that. Just the almonds. I've been eating almonds. We'll see. I've been eating them almost 2 mornings since 1975, I believe, or 76 for sure.
Wow. Yeah, I really appreciate you getting me back to those, because I was on the Luke Corona, buying 5-pound bags and making the coconut almond yogurt drink, like fermenting coconut meat and water with the sprouted almonds and blending it all. And I felt pretty good on that. That probably got me through my raw vegan experiment.
Interesting. Yeah, it's good to experiment with those type of things and see, because different strokes for different folks. Sometimes one thing will work for another and not work for the other. For instance, I take pregnenolone. It gave me energy and gave me, and still does, and gives me a lot of energy. When Vibrant Gal takes it, it puts her to sleep.
Wow. Yeah, well, you inspired me to get back on them because I felt really good on progesterone. And I did feel systemic effect from taking it topically. But I would do quite a bit on my arms and chest, before bed or whatever, and it would. I think that's what Ray Pete says. It supports sleep. So supposedly copper does that too. Supports your sleep. Well, I mean, a lot of things do, right? Sleep is so contextual. The other night, it was last week. My cat was chasing this mouse all around my bedroom, and he was knocking over the lamps and just scuffling all around. And so, I was just laying there, and so I finally said, "Screw it, I'm going to sleep outside." And fortunately, I have a bed on my deck, and so I just went out there, and it was 50 degrees. So it wasn't the most 40 to 50 degrees, but yeah, I slept better, breathing that fresh air all night, even though it was cold.
My mother was like that. No matter how cold it was in New Jersey or wherever we lived, she always insisted on having the window open at night. Some people claim that's bad for you, but it did her really well. She was very healthy.
Yeah, I wonder, because I tend to be like an intermittent mouth breather, I found, with like, ex-girlfriends or whatever that tell me, because I can't tell myself, right, unless I record myself. But that got me into like the mouth taping and the nasal dilators. But I wonder if sleeping in the cold is another way to like force yourself to nose breathe. Just huffing cold air through your mouth
Interesting.
probably isn't comfortable for your body.
That's an interesting point. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. Of course, the American Indians, they trained from the time of baby. It was part of the mother's job to hold the mouth shut on the baby. So they were trained to keep their mouth closed. So they didn't need anything like that. In fact, they thought the white people were retarded because they had their mouth open so often.
Probably not too far from the truth. They're disconnected from nature in a lot of ways, but that's interesting. Wow. Yeah, it seems to like starve the brain, right? If you don't nose breathe.
I think there's a difference. And also, when you see pictures of retarded people, they have their mouth open. Uh, After finding out about that, how almost every Indian tribe in Northern America did that. They knew about the mouth thing. How did all these diverse tribes know that? George Catlin, the artist, he painted in 40 tribes, and all 40 of those knew the nose thing. He wrote the first book on Buteyko breathing before Buteyko was even born, about how important it was to breathe through the nose and not through the mouth.
Wow. Adam, since you've researched a lot of interesting things, I'm curious if you've ever heard of the Tomatis method. It was like invented by a doctor. Um, what was his name? Forget his full name, but Dr. Tomatis. Oh, Alfred Tomatis, and it was basically like a way to. It was like listening to classical music or Gregorian chants through headphones, but using bone conduction at the same time. And you could buy it; it's like a couple $100. And I think it changes the pitch or the volume or both of the music. And they actually found it like benefited uh, Down syndrome people. Like it like increases the ability to close the mouth and stop drooling, keep the tongue in. So just curious if you've heard of that in with music.
No, it sounds very similar to G. Pat Flanagan, because he first came up with a
Hmm.
bone conduction unit, and it's definitely
Hmm.
interesting how you can hear when you plug your ears, you hear yourself louder. Also, I think if you're in a certain consciousness, I've been in consciousness when something it sounds like I'm in an echo chamber without doing anything, and it's a trick of the ears. Meditation involves mantra and also something called the audible life stream, where you get to hear a sound current. And the trick is to direct it to the right ear, and that takes it to the middle of the forehead. Now, I only met a couple of people in my life who had it in the middle of the forehead. And one guy was a crusty old chiropractor in Oregon, and he wanted me to make it go away.
Interesting. Wow. It doesn't does fluoride play a role in that? I know you talk a lot about fluoride, or is that different
If
in bone
fluoride
conduction?
cause a buzzing in the ear, you mean?
Or yeah, I know it, like fluoride in the bones has a really deep relationship, right?
Yeah, it causes, according to one of the chemical magazines by the chemists themselves, they said fluoride in the bone is directly proportional to the amount of bone cancer as you add it. And that was when fluoride was popular. This is Chemical and Engineering News. That's the magazine. You can't get it at the newsstand. You have to go to a university library or something. But they were very direct about it. Now, Donald Lay said you could fight fluorine homeopathically by eating garlic.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah, the guy I recently had on said copper and iodine both detoxify fluoride. Seems like there's a lot of things that counter it.
Yeah, another thing for chlorine, you can detoxify that with an onion. Onion is very powerful.
Wow.
They actually used it during the Second World War to stop, let's say, anthrax. Anthrax is supposedly can't be stopped by anything, and the U.S. Army did it routinely. When they would go to an area where it was, they would spray buildings with onion water.
Wow. I wonder if that's safer than ascorbic acid, because I've heard that, that isolated vitamin C compound protects against chlorine damage. But would you say someone swimming in like a chlorinated pool be better off just eating some onions before?
I would say so, because vitamin C is very squirrely. Some people do really well with it, but Ray Peat was talking about how it caused him all kinds of damage after they changed it. The original vitamin C, you couldn't have more than like 20 milligrams in a pill. But when they made the cheaper version where they could have 500, he started following it, and he started getting colds and sore throats and asthma and all kinds of attacks. And he didn't realize the connection with the vitamin C till he was at a hotel and the maid threw his vitamin C away, and he got instantaneously better. When he said that, I remembered the times I took the most vitamin C, I was getting a cold or a flu every 2 months. I was in jeopardy with my job at the phone company because they said, you can't take all this time off. I said, but I'm sick. And I went to a doctor, all kinds of things for it. But I never connected the vitamin C, because in other times when I didn't take it, I wouldn't get a cold or a flu for 2 or 3 years. And then when I would take it, but I'd never made that connection till then. There's 2 types of vitamin C, the ascorbic acid type, which is an antioxidant, and the deoxyascorbic acid type, which is the oxidant. Ray Peat is for the one in food, that is the oxidant, or I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you can leave ascorbic acid in liquid and it reconverts to the oxidized form, which is the type we use and that you get out of a baked potato.
Interesting. That's called, is that the same as dehydroascorbic acid? Is that what you're referring to? Or?
Yeah, I think I said that wrong. Dehydroascorbic acid. That's the one. God knows what I said.
No, that's fascinating. Yeah, that's really interesting what you said about taking vitamin C made you sick, because I was a very sick child growing up. Like, I took so many days off from school, which was nice in some respects because I was dodging the brainwashing. But at the same time, it really wasn't fun to have a sore throat and a cold and a flu. I think it felt like every 2-3 months. And I was taking a lot of emergency, that ascorbic acid packet with all the B vitamins and things. And it sounds like your experience is in line with what Morley Robbins talks about, how it depletes copper, and copper is our defense against pathogens. And that, if you take ascorbic acid, you deplete your copper and then you lower your immune system. It kind of interesting.
Yeah, copper and zinc are both important defenses. And of course, iron is not, except in the case of Lyme disease, where manganese is the problem. You want to be on low manganese for Lyme disease. But with most everything else, if you lower your iron, you get over colds and flus and a host of other problems simply by lowering the iron.
Mm. Kind of off topic. Do you still put what is it, lepidolite in your water? I think in the last interview I asked you about that for the lithium. I think Adano taught you that. I was wondering if you still ever do that.
I gave mine away, my last one. I should go to a rock shop. I kind of wish I hadn't given it away or had broken it in half and shared it. Yeah, I used to put it in distilled water with a piece of ginseng. And when we were traveling, we would drink out of this common jar that had it in. Don Lay was not afraid of germs. God knows how many times we drank out of that same bottle over the years, even. But he said that way you would get the correct amount of lithium. Because when you take larger amounts, you get disease. You get a moon face and all that when people take various forms of lithium that they have for psychology. But a small amount definitely is very healthy. And even to the point where Adano said lithium, it can cure every disease in the world and can cause every disease if you take too much.
Wow. Yeah, I think it was 4 years ago I experimented with lithium orotate, and I worked up to, I think it was 40 to 50 milligrams a day just for a few weeks. And I felt pretty good. But I know that could be dangerous if you continue with that long, because it's a trace mineral.
It can be, and it's very powerful as a trace element. All you need is a tiny amount of it to go a long way. Now, Adano said you can actually generate it in your body by holding the tip of your tongue to your palate. I have no way of validating
that. Well, Adam, we have some Q&A questions here. Do you want to jump into those? I'm sure it'll take a little bit to get through them.
Let's do it.
Awesome. My friend John has a good one here. Should you take copper on Friday for more effect? I guess as far as supplementing it.
Interesting.
Because does copper have a color that's associated with a certain day? Or I'd imagine it's blue, right? Blue or green?
I believe it is. And actually, my memory muscle is down on this one because I don't remember. But if it is, then you would actually have an advantage. You do during the time of day for certain things because we have a color coordination time of the minerals that match for the day in 24 hours. We have it in weekly and we have it in yearly. So theoretically, it actually could help, particularly if you eat it with blue foods. And blue foods are rare because the more refined you get toward violet, toward blue, you get a non-color. Blue eyes, there's no such thing. There's no blue pigment in eyes. And if you take a blue jay and you take its feather and pound it with a hammer, it turns black. It's nothing but the reflection of the blue, like our eyes. In a bluebird, same thing. When you see blue in except for plants, it goes away. And look at a lobster. It's blue, but as soon as you apply heat, that blue is gone just like that. So blue is very rare, and copper, if it isn't blue, I'd have to look that up myself. Then yes, you could actually get some extra benefit by doing it then.
Wow, interesting. Since you mentioned blue eyes, Adam, I'm curious. Some people have said that my eyes change color. Have you heard of that in people? Like, do you know what the meaning of that is? If people's eyes, like within the same day, within hours, changing color?
It can happen. Some of it is because of reflected light, too, is where you'll see it. Basically, all eyes except albino eyes. If you've ever seen albino eyes, you go right through the eye. It's completely white. But when you have a blue eye, you have melanin at about 1/400 millionth of a size of particle that reflects the blue light back. If the melanin gets a little thicker, you have a green eye. Very similar to seeing a blue ocean and then a green ocean that has reflected light. And then you get various other colorations of eyes, so you get brown, which is maximum sunglasses for the eye. a lot of people, the Germans started a thing in eugenics that brown eyes were toxic and blue eyes were not. It was a total racial thing and spread to the United States. And a German named Deck, Joseph Deck, he corrected that and said that was nonsense. But if you get alien pigments in your eyes, different colors and spots, brown, those are alien pigments and they do represent problems. You can have urorosines, carotenoids. If you get carotenoids in your eye, you are not handling beta carotene very well. You better get a retinol source at that point, for instance.
Interesting. Yeah, I had a friend, Taylor DeGroot, on the show, and she's knowledgeable about lipofuscin and iron overload. And it's interesting, the research on, I mean, you could find really fascinating research on what these do to the eye and how you can see it in the eye and like the little brown specks. Like, I know there's the whole field of iridology, but it seems like most of them are out to lunch, right? Because they don't know about lipofuscin and excess iron.
Joseph Deck did know about it, and he could, with iridology, you could tell iron overload. Often, not all the time, but often, if you use a slit lamp like I used to use, you will see a swarm of black dots, and that usually means iron overload. But by the time you see them in the eye, you have a liver problem and a heart problem already too. It's reflective of something that's happening. So you have a lot of work to do once you find that in iridology. Iridology is dissed by conventional medicine, but it has a lot of validation. You can, especially when you apply it scientifically, like Joseph Deck did. Bernard Jensen, that was kind of pop iridology. He got some things right, but he got a lot of things wrong too.
Interesting. Let me see another question here. What does Adam think copper toxicity means?
Well, here in Montecito, they have power lines, and it took the copper pipes in the soil, and people drinking the water were getting poisoned. So you can get enough of toxicity. But like I said, we have an adaptation for copper because it's so important. The Protean system, I'm probably pronouncing that way off, is extremely important, and there's all kinds of various enzymes and protective enzymes and metabolizing enzymes that involve copper. So our body has pretty well learned how to detoxify it. But with anything, if you overload it to a certain degree, it's going to cave in. We have more of a tolerance than dogs because they first noticed that dogs were, one guy spent $3,000 on his vet before he realized it was copper poisoning, since dogs are more sensitive than people are. And then they had a whole rash of it from the pipes in Santa Barbara proper. This one apartment was condemned because the electricity was going to the pipe and letting all that copper out into their body. But again, you have to get a lot of copper to do that. Most people are not in danger of copper poisoning unless they live near some kind of copper refinery that's polluting the water or whatever.
Interesting. Yeah, I recently learned with like a whole house water filter, if it's just reverse osmosis and it doesn't add back in minerals at the end and the water's like hungry, it's almost like whole house distilled, but it's just very like aggressive water that could actually erode the copper pipes. Versus if you remineralize the water and put back in minerals after you filter it, then it's not going to want to grab the copper as it's moving through to your faucets.
Interesting. That brings up something that we drink distilled water. And now I realize that we never drink it plain. We always drink it with something. And you could kind of say it's hungry for the minerals that you take it with. Because we use distilled water for coffee, for soup, for everything. But almost never, I haven't had a plain glass of water in probably years, and only would take it on desperation. Always mix it in soup, sauces, I mix my eggs in beet juice and what do you call it? Pineapple juice, and I add some water into it and things like that. So I always mix it in some way.
Mm. That's a good point. Yeah, that's really interesting. Help with
I like that
scoliosis.
term
What are your
hungry,
thoughts
though. That's
on?
really interesting.
Yeah, right. What about scoliosis, Adam? Any tips for that? Like the the spine condition?
Oh, for what kind of condition? Scoliosis.
Oh,
Scoliosis?
scoliosis. Mhm.
Toe pulling. We actually have a video on that. One thing you do
Wow.
is uh, is grab the big toe and pull forward towards you, push back and forth. And if you do that long enough, sometimes it evens it up. Now, there are nutritional problems involved. You must have protein for the spine, for instance. A lot of people talk about calcium, but what do they do with cow bones? They make protein powder out of it because protein is one of the main ingredients of strong bones. The more protein you have in the bone, the stronger it is. Look at the abalone. The abalone has 99% calcium and 1% protein, but the protein is so strong that an abalone shell is probably about 100 times stronger than a human bone.
Wow. Interesting. Let me see. This is a random one. What is your favorite animal and why? I'm gonna guess butterfly.
Yeah, the butterfly is one of them, definitely. You know, I one of my problems with cats is they go after birds. I prefer them to go after rodents here because we have a rodent problem. But I was a bird watcher since a kid. I guess you call it an ornithologist. I didn't know. I just got binoculars or first a telescope, went out in the middle of the night, and a scarlet tanager is one of my favorite birds, and an bunting is right behind it. And they're kind of rare birds to find. Uh, so, and lately we've got really attached to our cats here, or to our neighbors' cats, our landlord's cats.
Wow. Do you guys see bats there? I think when I lived down in Southern California, I'd still see them around.
Bats?
Hmm.
Yeah, definitely. We have
Yeah.
bats.
Mm. Mm.
Sometimes they're rabbits
Yeah.
too. So they make me nervous because they come out as soon as the sun goes down here, man, they're swarming through the air. Now, when I lived in Tucson, Arizona, there were hundreds of them in the air. I would go to the gym at 4 in the morning and hundreds would be in the air. Then suddenly one year they disappeared. No one knew why. And the last 2 or 3 years I lived in Tucson, no more bats everywhere.
Wow. I wonder if it's an EMF thing or the chemicals they're using in that area. Yeah, having a big lake here, people are like, you must have mosquitoes. And I'm like, nope, I haven't gotten bitten once since I've lived in this house. And there are like tons of like if I go out kayaking in the summer, there's just dragonflies landing on you and flying by you, like thousands on the lake, which eat mosquitoes. But there's also swallows which eat mosquitoes, and then at night, just the bats come out. And I have this little meter that can basically transfer their squeaks into like audible sound, so the ultrasound into audible, and so I can point that around and kind of hear they're squeaking. It's kind of fun.
Wow, that is neat. Yeah, we bats are not blind, by the way. People say they're blind. They have both radar and sight, or they have a double advantage over
Wow.
birds. We just had a bird hit our window here and almost die, and finally was able to fly away. When I lived on a ranch in Fayetteville, Texas, it had been a resort, and there were windows on both sides, huge windows. I picked up about two birds a week, at least that were dead, and a lot of others hit and got away. But they drove their beak right through their brain.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a shame. From hummingbirds to crows.
Wow. I have big windows here. I heard you could put up like reflective stuff. Like I think I've seen at the farm stores that like so they won't fly into it.
Yeah, because it is a shame. I love that openness of the windows like that, but it was just so sad seeing all those birds dying. we, I, in just a year, I guess I was there for 2 years, probably 200 birds. It was a common thing. I'd
Wow.
go out and see the bird away.
Wow. Well, I guess, didn't you say you could eat songbirds? They're high in some nutrient.
Yeah, it used to be a staple of the American diet because you're out in the plain and you got to eat something. Our pioneers would fight them. Well, it would eat them. But in Manhattan, just like they have a huge fish market now, maybe it's called the Fulton Fish Market. I forget the name of it, but they used to have a songbird market that have uh, robins and bluebirds and goldfishes, finches, and of course you would eat about 15 or 20 of them at a meal. In some cases, it was a small enough bird, but it was really popular, and it kind of shocks people that we ate those birds.
Yeah, I wonder if the carnivores are going to get into that, because I see them eating raw testicles every day and raw kidney and raw heart and drinking blood. But I haven't seen any of the carnivores eat a bird yet, especially raw. So curious if they'll get into that.
Yeah, yeah. The cats do here. They present it to us sometimes to show, look how good a hunter we are.
This is a good
I
one,
think we
Adam.
had a little chipmunk here.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think we had a chipmunk here ate a baby quail one time. I didn't realize that they ate meat, but he kind of drew
Wow.
the little baby quail into his lair, and the quail never came out.
That's so funny. Is blackstrap molasses good to consume?
Ray Pete would say no. I have mixed feelings about it. If you have a cold or flu because of the iron, I wouldn't take it. I think there are some things in molasses for one reason. Uh, when some people do have iron deficiencies, especially there's a genetic issue coming out of Sicily. And so a friend of mine had that, and several of my friends had that. And the sister went to her gynecologist, and the gynecologist freaked out. She said, "We have to put you on blood transfusion. Your baby would be in danger." She said, "No, I'm going to take this tonic that my brother told me about that he got from his mentor." And she said, "Okay." The gynecologist was a woman. Said, You have to be monitored though." Well, she got her hemoglobin built back so well from combining tomato juice and molasses that the gynecologist said, "I'm going to give it to all of my patients. I've never seen such a rich hemoglobin level in someone from doing something like this." So she was blown away by it. And other people have had success stories too. While iron by itself is very toxic. I saved a man's life one time when he was on his deathbed and I was brought to visit him. And when he mentioned a black stool, I said, "You aren't taking an iron supplement given to you by a doctor, are you?" He said, "Yes, I am." I said, "Is it ferrous sulfate?" And he said, "I don't know." I said, "Well, I went to his medicine cabinet and found it. It was ferrous sulfate, which you never take." And guess what? He got off of his deathbed. It took a while, but once he stopped taking the iron, it was killing him.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, because I've had some people ask me what to do for low hemoglobin, and blackstrap molasses and tomato juice, right?
Yeah, it certainly worked for my friend's sister. and it's worked for other people. And by the way, your other type of iron sources can be very dangerous. I don't know if I told you the story about the vegetarian vampire. I I managed a health food store in Austin, and this guy walks by, and he's dressed like Tom Cruise, in the movie, the vampire movie, the Anne Rice vampire movie. So we catch eyes. So he comes walking into me, and he said, "I am not a vampire." I said, "Oh, that's nice to know." He said, "But it's interesting because your complexion is grayish and you have an iron overload." He said, "That can't be because I'm a vegetarian." And I said, well, vegetarians can have an iron overload too. He said, how? And I said, by eating canned black olives. He said, I eat 2 cans a day. I said, well, you better stop because you're overloaded in iron or your skin is getting gray from it.
Wow. I didn't know. So olives contain a significant amount of iron.
Only the canned ones. You get other black olives, they can be done black. They're very dark purplish, actually, if you look at it closely. They're black. But when you get the canned ones and they say ferrous fumarate, watch out. That's one of the worst ones you can get. There's other iron supplements too, that like the nail one, ferrous oxide and things like that. But ferrous fumarate and ferrous sulfate, those are really one you do not want to touch. If the doctor will only prescribe the sulfate because they don't want you to go into the health food store. And I've worked I've managed 4 health food stores and a vitamin department in another. Never seen a sulfate ever in any of those stores, ever, or other health food stores I visited. Yeah, they would not do it. But you get it at a pharmacy. If you go and a doctor gives you a prescription, they're going to give you the sulfate kind. And your stool is likely to turn black and you're going to be in danger.
Wow. I wonder if they gave copper sulfate, if people would be doing better instead of iron sulfate.
Probably so. Definitely with iron sulfate, you don't want to take it.
Yeah, recently I went down a fun rabbit hole, and I still have to go deeper into it. The heme versus non-heme forms of iron, because the carnivores will beat their chest and say, you only get heme iron from meat. But, it's not necessarily a good thing. And I recently learned that even muscle meat contains non-heme iron, which, according to the carnivore people is bad. And, the iron inhibition effect of coffee is the polyphenols. Like I found a study that showed like green tea and different teas with polyphenols. It's actually the polyphenols that inhibit the iron absorption. It's like 70 to 90% or something like that, which is part of the huge benefits of coffee, right?
They do. One of the things that Ray Peat likes coffee for is because he says eat it with the meals, because then you retard the iron. You prevent iron overload. And a lot of people have it. Back in the day, they used to use I took Geritol. I'm 20 years old or 21 years old. I'm taking Geritol. What the heck, I hitchhiked across the United States. My first all the way across from Dothan, Alabama through the Florida Panhandle and all I had was Tang and Geritol. And so I ate the Tang, instant breakfast drink, and took the Geritol, and I could buy crackers for 5 cents a piece. I had $2, so that's all I ate all the way to Van Nuys.
That's incredible. It just started hailing here.
I looked like I escaped from a concentration camp.
That's quite the combo. That's awesome. Adam, what are your favorite food sources of copper? Someone asked. It's in potatoes partially, right?
They have some in them, and you get some in the kale. Let's see, where else do I get copper from? Almost every food has at least some copper in. So if you eat whole food, you're going to get enough copper, at least to survive on. Some people are going to want more copper for certain reasons. But if you eat a McDonald's diet or eat a lot of processed food, you're not likely to get your copper, definitely. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people in the U.S. that eat the SAD diet, where you just don't get minerals and you get chemicals in it, carrageenum, all these other chemicals that block your whole foods and your copper and things. There's a list of them that you get.
Yeah, I'm really excited to grow my own food, because it's my understanding that there are two aspects that make copper potentially not show up in the whole foods, and it's either like monocropping, stripping the topsoil, like intensive monocropping, which can deplete the minerals, just like never replenishing the soil. But then the second thing, which nobody ever talks about pretty much ever, is the pH. Like I had the permaculture expert, Jeff Lawton, on my show a couple of years ago, and he was saying that the pH is what opens and closes doors to allow minerals to be uptaken into the root matrix. And acid rain or fertilizer can change the pH, or biosludge, tap water. There's a million variables, right, that the farmer uses that can affect which mineral doors open and shut in the soil, and block or allow, maybe allow excess iron and block copper, or who knows. We're in such a complex time now, right? To some degree.
That's why I wrote a book called Acidify or Die. It was actually a rebuttal of alkalize or die. And of course, we need both. But for people to say, well, pH doesn't have anything to do with food. Look at the blood. It's so set. It's set to a tiny degree. How can that be anything? Well, the blood isn't the part of your body where disease happens. It's the non-buffered places. So imagine having an alkaline stomach. What would you do with your food? Or having the pH of your blood for your large intestine or your small intestine or the cell. And the truth is, the rest of your body is like a farmland. And to say that it doesn't make any difference is like telling a farmer it doesn't make any difference. It's a huge difference. And when you get a non-buffered area that you can only measure with a pH meter, like a Beckman pH meter, that's free of the buffering zone. It can't be buffered. So it's a non-buffered area. The blood is immune to that kind of disease. You can't measure pH in the urine. You can't measure it in the saliva. You can't measure it in the sweat. You can't measure it in the blood. Those are technically outside your body. Even the blood is really technologically outside your body. The next step is air outside of the body. So people get that really mixed up. Here's the other thing they get mixed up. The food you buy is not short on minerals, even if you buy it at Safeway and places like that. But the soil it came out of it's the farmer that loses. He can't do a second crop. Because if you see a vegetable that looks crappy, you can go and see what disease it had. It's yellow, it's missing nitrogen, it's missing that, it's missing copper, it's missing whatever. But the final product you eat is not that. It doesn't hurt your health to eat that vegetable. It hurts the farmer's soil who cannot do a second crop. And that's our big danger today, is that we don't refertilize with permaculture, different methods they have. And of course, we're out of farmland, and we should be growing our food locally anyway, because look at the bare shelves Biden that's going on now, where we can't get a supply chain of food. We're here in Santa Barbara because there's lots of food here. They grow it right locally. In fact, California is even talking about not shipping it to other places, because there are other places that the shelves are bare in places, and even Oregon and places like that, they have bare shelves. If you depend on Whole Foods and Walmart to get your food, you're vulnerable.
It's a great point. Yeah, I'm happy to have goats, and because they're when I clean out their stalls, that's like prime soil additive, like their poop. And I just look over there in their pens as as the weather's starting to warm up here in North Idaho and the sun's coming out, and it looks way healthier than last year. All the plants sprouting up, they just look more vibrant from all that goat poop that they're just spreading everywhere.
A lot of so-called primitive people get their nutrients from eating feces, called coprophagy. In fact, one of the reasons they put baby chicks on wires is to keep them from eating their own feces. Dogs do it, but they won't eat their own feces after 3 days. After 3 days, it's not true. Oh. The Inuit, they eat feces. They find it on the trail, they eat it. So in a way, they're doing the fecal implants from the wrong end.
Wow. Yeah, the last year, I don't know what it was, if it was where I was living, but for a short time I had a dog, a German Shepherd, and taking him for a walk, he pooped worms. And they were really long, maybe, I don't know, 10 inches, white worms. And with my cat, my cat, I know, hopefully no one's eating while they're listening, a little warning, but she had, for like a week or two, she had worms coming out of her anus live during the day. Like they would come out and be crawling around her butt. And I started giving her diatomaceous earth on her food. And then I used my remote Rife frequency machine on the parasite protocol. That combination wiped him out. But yeah, that freaked me out. I'm like, what's going on with the worms this year? You know?
Yeah, that's great because normally you need an antibiotic, but you can get a tapeworm out by luring them out with warm milk. But make sure you keep it at the anus, otherwise they'll come out the mouth if you put the milk up there. I thought that was a joke when I first heard it. I first heard that in the 70s, and it's really true. They will come out for the warm milk.
Wow. Have you looked into, Adam, like in your book, did you write about the anti-parasitic properties of copper? I've heard that mineral alone is anti-parasitic.
What properties?
Oh, like copper's like anti-parasitic role.
Oh yeah, definitely. Mm. It's used that way, and they even, I think, make some kind of copper screens to keep parasites down, if I'm not mistaken. I remember something about that technology from the past.
It makes sense because parasites love iron, right? So that logically would mean they hate copper.
Iron is what they crave. Yeah, it's one of the major ones.
Hmm. What are your thoughts on seasonal eating? Someone asks, because some people say like we shouldn't eat any fruit in the winter, right? Because it's unnatural. Like up here, I was doing orange juice throughout the winter. I felt great, but definitely somewhat unnatural.
I think the daily routine and the weekly and the monthly are even more important than the seasonal. The seasonal does make a difference, though. It's more like what the foods are available in your area, but it also is good to supplement with some foods from the other area now that we can. In Wisconsin, when the pioneers didn't know what to do, 49% of the state, the entire population, had goiter because back then you could have an iodine deficiency, and indeed they did. Now it's the other way. It's almost everybody in the U.S. has an iodine overload. They have actually too much. You have to be living in a remote area or be a farmer that doesn't buy anything at Whole Foods or Walmart or a supermarket to have an iodine deficiency. They put it in salt. They put it in dairy to clean the dairy. Even when you get organic, you're going to get iodine. And many of the food additives are as much as 50% iodine. So if you're going to eat processed food, you're probably iodine overloaded.
Wow, fascinating. Yeah, because there's a whole group of people that use was it Lugol's and nascent internally, and I think they started introducing it to the salt, iodized salt, just like in the 40s, I think, or something, or somewhere around there, 40s or 50s. It's a fascinating mineral, though. It seems to, people focus a lot on the thyroid, right? Because it's like iodine plus tyrosine. But there's like iodide too, right? Which no one talks about. Iodide has to be converted to iodine, and that requires some nutrients that most people are deficient in.
It's an important element. Again, we need a small amount of it, and it's important for like transformation. Many people don't know this, that if you have a polywog and have no iodine in the water whatsoever, it will grow into a giant collywog. It never achieves frogness.
Wow.
And then can have a baby though, but it'll have another giant polywog and there will be no frogs. But say you go the fifth generation, add a little iodine to the water, now you get frogs again. So it's extremely important for evolution. Adamo used to call it, I mentioned the 12 basic minerals of solar nutrition. He said iodine was the Jesus to the 12 disciples, which were the 12 basic elements. So he regarded it as extremely important element. It's just that people often get too much of a good thing. I mean, a glass of water may be good, but if you drink 5 gallons of it, you may die from
it. Wow. This is random, Adam. Have you ever heard of sea monkeys? I think it was like a prehistoric. I had it as a kid. It was one of those little like aquarium toys. They're called like triops. Have you ever seen those?
I've seen them back in the past. I don't know much about them, but I have seen them at a pet shop.
Okay, you just reminded me with the. Yeah, that was my first pet. You reminded me with the polywog thing. Wait, I had one we named Crazy Ivan, and when he died, we put him in a capsule and buried him under the dirt.
Wow, my pet
interesting
used
childhood.
To be
Oh, really?
Yeah, they didn't stay alive long. I didn't really understand how to keep them in a little. We had in the country, we had a swimming pool that my father built about a foot deep. So when we weren't swimming in it anymore, I would put my crawfish in there, but I couldn't figure out how to feed them to keep them alive. But I loved crawfish. I was raised in the country, crawfish, all kinds of animals like that, and I'd go wandering through the woods and pick them up. Sometimes they'd pinch me a good one, but I got pretty good at catching them as a kid. And yeah, it was nice being raised in the country.
Did you ever eat them?
No, a lot of people do it. Kind of in Texas, you go to a bar in East Texas and they have them there. You eat the crawfish with your beer. I never liked lobster. I never liked crawfish for whatever reason. So I haven't eaten them.
I bet they have copper in them, right? Like lobster or any crustacean will have copper.
See, they use, instead of iron for their blood, they use copper for their blood. So obviously you're going to get copper if you eat any kind of crabs, lobsters, even certain scorpions have it in, and certain insects use copper blood. Iron isn't the only blood member. Even I think a sea squirt uses vanadium as the center of its vanadiaglobin, whatever you want to call it. They used to call it Cooper globin, but then they borrowed it for Star Trek. Yeah, what is some foreign race out in outer space use a Cooper globin? So now they changed it to hemocyan, I think it's called, instead of Cooper globin. I like the old name because you could see clearly the relationship between hemoglobin and Cooper globin and whatever they call the vanadiaglobin.
Wow. Yeah, there was a guy I saw on social media eating worms. I mean, there's everything on the internet now. And I'd imagine earthworms have a significant amount of copper.
I would think so. I wonder if they have Cooper globin. They might. A surprisingly amount of animals do depend on copper for their blood supply. A lot of, I think octopi do too.
Mm-hmm. This is a good one, Adam. Which foods are best cooked and which are eaten raw? I think I've heard you say in the past, like tomatoes become more nutritious when they're cooked, right? That's one.
Yeah, if they're vine ripened, they're about as nutritious as they're going to be. But sometimes for digestion, they just taste good if you dextrinize it at a low temperature, about 200 degrees. I once asked Ray Pete about dextrinization, and he didn't really answer me because he's familiar with there's a process of dextrinization using chemicals. Well, I was talking about pyrodextrinization. And he said if you eat potatoes, you can make protein out of the ketones in your own body. But I found, and I'd like to ask Ray Pete about this, you have to have 400 degrees and a slight amount of caramelization to form those ketones. I found it in several sources, and I've never asked them. So actually, baking it at 400 degrees is the only way you're going to get that extra protein. You get other benefits in digestibility by dextrinizing at 200 degrees all day if a person had a real digestion problem. But if you did it the other way, the ketones would actually absorb the extra potassium and everything. They say don't eat a potato because if you have a kidney problem, you're going to overload. Just not true.
Wow, interesting. Huh. What are your thoughts on Lyme disease? Someone asks. I saw my first tick up here, but I realized it was like a wood tick, and that supposedly those don't carry Lyme disease.
Always made me nervous after I found out about them. The thing about Lyme disease is the closest relation to syphilis. So if you catch it early and give yourself 1 or 2 shots, just like you don't have to have a year's worth of an antibiotic for syphilis, you just get a shot or 2 and you're clear. Same with gonorrhea. Well, the same with Lyme disease. Now, what people call Lyme disease that they're suffering long term, it's done damage to their body. And they shouldn't be treating it with antibiotics. They should figure out what organs have been compromised and repair those organs. Because a lot of people will think that the Lyme stays alive in your body. But as far as I know, you kill it pretty quickly. And all these antibiotic treatments where you go in week after week to get it is mostly a scam. But it's very important to find out what organs have been compromised, and then whether it's sugar or saturated fat or protein, repair the organ. Each one has sugar repairs a lot of things in the first place, even cures cancer in many cases. And you won't hear your doctor say that. They want to make everything with a short word dangerous. So fat has 3 letters. It must be dangerous. Sugar has 5. It must be dangerous. Salt has 4. It must be dangerous. But you have a long name for something, methionine, or even longer than that, and it must be good for you.
It's a good point. Yeah, I heard a horror story of a Lyme tick like embedding in this woman's brain, and it was like disrupting her motor function. And it's like straight out of the Alien movies. You know, just like they just like burrowed into her past her skull into her brain.
And that, that's a good question. Could the antibiotic get up into the brain area? That might present a serious problem. Good question on that one.
Yeah.
Normally, if you get
maybe that's where like
in your arm or someplace like that, then just an antibiotic shot or 2 could clear it. The earlier you get it, the better, and that's the problem, finding out. Also, taking the B vitamins seems to help. They knew that for Rocky Mountain spotted fever back in the 40s. So if a person was bit, I would probably take some brewer's yeast, not nutritional yeast, but brewer's yeast, and perhaps some, which is a good source of selenium, by the way, and maybe even take some B vitamins.
Why do you say no nutritional yeast? Is it because most of it's fortified, or?
Yeah, fortified with cheap vitamins. And here's how you tell. If you're taking a vitamin of any kind that has an ingredient over 5 milligrams, it's synthetic. There's no way. And they trick people. Acerola vitamin C. Add a pinch of acerola to a 55-gallon drum of synthetic vitamin C. It's now acerola cherry vitamin C. Rosehip vitamin C. Same thing. That's how they do it. It's a total scam. If you read the label carefully, they separate them on the label by law. If they don't, they're breaking the law. Sometimes they do that. But synthetic vitamins, most vitamins are synthetic. But now, say you buy a natural vitamin, they often have their own problems. So you have to be careful in what you're getting there. Now, by the way, a synthetic vitamin is not necessarily bad. Right now, we're taking a synthetic thyroid because the old one that used to be from Armour Meat Company is not the same thing anymore. They extract something out of it, so you're not getting the same thing. So you can duplicate things with synthetic. I'm not against synthetic vitamins. Neither was Dirk Pearson and Sandy Shaw when they wrote their book. By the way, they regarded the oxidized form of vitamin C as a problem. I used to think that until Ray Peat turned the tables on that, flipped the script, where now the oxidized form of vitamin C is okay.
Yeah, that's a good segue, because someone asked here. I think she's on Facebook. His thoughts on Doris Loh, ascorbic acid and copper research. But we could just say like ascorbic acid, because she's really big into supplementing a high dose ascorbic acid and high dose melatonin. I don't know if you've come across her posts.
I find a problem with both melatonin and with high doses of vitamin C. Even though vitamin C work well for Norman Cousins, so it works for some people. But here's the problem with melatonin. It's a hormone, and its main job is to keep up with the thyroid's job to destroy serotonin, which is a very dangerous chemical in our colon and in our brain. But if you supply melatonin, then it doesn't need to get it from the serotonin. So you accumulate large amounts of serotonin. And by the way, serotonin is supposed to be something that calms you down. How come it is the very chemical that killed Steve Irwin, the crocodile guy, remember? He got stabbed by that was serotonin that did him in. Serotonin is one of the most deadly poisons in lighter amounts. Do you have nettle in your area? I know it's up in Idaho. Nettle, and you touch it and you get stung. Yeah. That's serotonin is what you're getting. So serotonin is a dangerous chemical, and it's given like, you need to up your layer of serotonin. We have to give you serotonin uptake inhibitors and all that kind of stuff so you get more. And actually, it's a very dangerous chemical. Melatonin wipes it out.
Yeah, I know I know methylene blue, they say don't take with SSRIs. I believe methylene blue protects against excess serotonin.
I haven't messed with it. The first time I heard of methylene blue was to get rid of gallstones. I heard about methylene blue and methylene red back in the 70s. And I have no experience with it, only heard people using it for various things. And now it's very big in the Ray Peat community.
Yeah, that's a super synthetic. I think it was originally used to dye clothes blue. And Morley calls it copper polish. So it has this really interesting relationship with copper, because I guess complex 4 is run by copper, and it's a blue protein. And so copper is like attracted there and helps improve energy production, supposedly without oxygen. So if their mitochondria is like oxygen deprived, just adding methylene blue, it's almost like a oxygen surrogate that can still make energy. It's pretty interesting compound.
Interesting, because of course the mitochondria are so important that people have misinterpreted Otto Warburg's thing saying it's sugar. He said, no, the sugar wasn't being metabolized correctly, and you got lactic acid. You don't want the lactic acid, you want the sugar. So they even did experiments where people went for a gentle walk, and they were full of lactic acid. But if you just took a spoonful of sugar before that walk, no lactic acid. So sugar is very important, and I've upped my amount of sugar now after finding out things like that.
Yeah, it's always a big debate. That's what I, at this point, disagree with Morley about, because he says that sugar basically activates iron or something like that. Like sugar and iron have a relationship, and then copper and fat have a relationship. So you can't absorb copper without fat, and then I guess iron becomes more of a problem in the presence of sugar. But I wonder what other variables are involved, right? Like if it's like a balancing act.
Fat is necessary for copper absorption. There's no doubt about that. It's where it goes. A lot of people don't realize that The muscles need fat, but when the fat goes into the heart and the brain, it causes problems. So you want to protect those and have it go into the muscle only. And in fact, to protect the heart is so important. When people bodybuild and they take testosterone, it doesn't go into the muscle mainly. It goes into the heart and the brain to protect it from the workout.
Interesting. Wow. Let me see. I'm looking at other questions here. Best place on the body for topical application of minerals and vitamins. I know you said earlier, like wherever there's a problem area, but for like systemic benefit, would you say anywhere? Or?
Yeah, most elements will not absorb through the skin. It's a perfect spaceship, a spacesuit. Actually, we could go out into space without a spacesuit. They have all this deal. If you go out without a suit on, you blow up like in the movies and things like that. That's all false. All we need is a thin plate of titanium armor in space because these meteorites come at like a bullet. And you need something to stop it, and titanium would stop that. But otherwise, you could go out totally nude as long as you had something to breathe in, and because our body is so impermeable, you can't really get things by sitting in a bathtub and getting minerals in them. You can get salt and a few things like that come in through the body, carbon dioxide very readily, but the other ones it's best to take it internally. Some things do absorb, and the best thing is to find the thinnest area of the body where the skin is the thinnest, where it's the thickest. So maybe in the palm of the hand or the wrists or places like that, the butt, wherever the skin is going to be the thinnest is where you're more likely to get it in. One exception to the rule is olive oil. Olive oil will go into the general system, but other oils won't. They get stopped. They go into the skin, but they won't go into the deeper levels of the skin and get picked up by the blood circulation, the lymph circulation, and elsewhere. And that's because we have a boundary that protects us from the environment. It's like the border patrol around us, and it involves an entire autonomic nervous system, again, the adrenal dermal nervous system, because we do eat certain things from it, but they're refined like light. We eat light, and we can actually survive on light if we learn the secret of it, which I haven't yet, but it can be done by getting your minerals out of light because they start at colors and then precipitate into dust and then into actual reality. We go through a state of sonics to light, to color, to liquid, and then finally to precipitate matter. And it can be done and is done by certain yogis, but I haven't learned the secret yet.
Wow. Yeah. I often think about how we're like light machines, right? Like our mitochondria are like water wheels, but they're also light wheels. And there's like this light show going off inside of us. And it just seems like there's this obsession with getting like outside in light. But I always just keep thinking like, what about the red and infrared that we generate? The blue light, the green light, the UV, like we're pretty much creating the whole rainbow, right? From our body.
Well, except they come in through the eyes, but not through the skin. Interesting thing, if you take a flashlight and shine it through your earlobe or through your fingers, you notice how it's red. It's never orange. If it was orange light, you'd be dead. If it was yellow light, it'd be dead. All of those lights would kill us because our flesh is not attuned to handle that energy. But red will go right through us. And indeed, it's the delivery system for vitamin D, for testosterone, and a whole bunch of chemicals that have been not named by science. The people who knew were the researchers at General Electric who invented the incandescent light to match, to get the frequencies away from blue, even in a white incandescent light before they got the super whites and all that. It was designed to mimic the sun. But then the General Electric scientists said, we've got hubris here because we're never going to match the sun, but we can approximate it and do certain therapies with light. What they discovered is the extra nervous system. And they found that a sunburn is a reflex. It's not a chemical reaction at all. Because how could you explain the fact that if you take a black man and you put a big square of white skin on him, it turns black eventually, whether you're tanned or not. If you have the opposite, a white man, you put black skin, it turns white. Well, how is that explained by local chemistry if it isn't a reflex coming from the other direction for then the skin than from without out the skin? There's a whole other mysterious things too, like taking cocaine, you won't sunburn, you won't burn or sun tan. But if you take certain chemicals like chlorophyll, you'll burn easier. So people who take citrus fruit, including oranges or things, and they go to the beach, they're going to have less of a time to be at the beach before they get burned because they're using the energy directly from the sun through chlorophyll, through St. John's wort, through a lot of herbs too, through buckwheat, through different foods that actually energizes where we can eat light. But again, once you take those, it's less time at the beach or you're going to be sorry.
Wow. Yeah, I must have had it backwards because years ago I was taking like astaxanthin and, algae oil and chlorophyll. I was taking a ton of spirulina and chlorella. And my goal was to absorb more sunlight, which maybe I was, but that's interesting that it kind of sensitizes us to getting a sunburn.
But also you get the energy from it. You're correct. It's just that it's better to spend less time in the sun and learn the difference when you're feeling you want a tiny bit of burn, but just enough to set off the defense. Melanin in our bodies is actually a heat sink. It converts UV light into heat energy. And you will find that melanin is one of the most important elements in nature. A brown tree, that's melanin. You see brown in every animal that's brown, or even peacocks and every type of animal, you'll find melanin in it. Life is impossible without melanin.
Wow. Yeah, and I think UV stimulates the melanocytes to make melanin. And was it you need copper to make melanin? There's so many interesting relationships with that.
Copper is necessary. And by the way, melanin works other than places in light. You can actually get a tan if you want to take your time to do it by rubbing your arms. You keep rubbing it, you're going to get melanin there. You're going to get tan. If you rub your body, cold can actually give you a tan. How do you explain Inuits who have been up for hundreds of years in the north and they're dark brown?
Wow. That's a good point.
Obviously, the sun isn't the only thing doing it.
Right. Wow. Well, awesome, Adam. I think we got through most of the questions here. Maybe we could do one more. Reversing hair loss. I've heard it depends on how long it's been happening. Like I had a guest on my show, Jason, said if it's like over 10 years, then it's generally not reversible. But if you're within a 10-year window, then you can regrow the hair. What are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting because I never had the patience to do it. But I worked out with a guy at the gym when it was popular to put pickle preservative on your head. What's the name of that stuff? Polysorbate 80. Polysorbate 80. So they sold it at health food stores for a raised price. I think it was only like $5 or something like that. And you put it on your head. So at the gym, this guy was telling me, I'm doing this, it works. And I thought, well, I put it on for a few days, nothing happened, because I didn't want to take the time. Well, over the years, this guy did it for 4 years and grew all of his hair back. It took him 4 years. He grew a full head of hair. And at that point, I think about here was my hairline, and he had about the same. He grew it all back. And I saw him every maybe 6 or 8 months, and suddenly there'd be more hair and more hair and more hair. Finally, the last time I saw him 4 years later, I met his wife, and he at the Safeway, and he had a full head of hair. And his wife said the same thing. He said, I've seen him do it, just gradually. But he disobeyed the rule. You're supposed to irritate the scalp with it in the shower, hold it on for 10 minutes. He left his on all the time, which made me nervous. But he grew a full gate of hair. Irritation is a key.
Wow.
Ray P talks about someone fell in the fireplace and burned his scalp, hair grew back. And I knew someone that had white hair, snow white hair. She had a lobotomy, something where they put a lacuna, like a shape like that in the back. It grew back, jet black. She told me I look like a marmoset. But the interesting thing is, after about a year, it started to change. Now, I was shocked when I first shaved my head. I used to have long hair like a hippie down to my butt. One time I got aggravated because it kept tangling. So I went and just shaved it off. But when I did, I think the shock made my hair grow back curly. It grew back. I didn't have curly hair. I had very straight hair, and it grew back curly like I had a perm. Well, after about when it grew out to about 3 or 4 inches long, it started straightening out again, and it's been straight. So I tried to get curly hair by doing it again, but I guess it wasn't a shock, or maybe the time of the moon or something. It always grew back straight after that. So there's many mysteries about how shock works, and even can make your hair gray overnight, despite what scientists say. Aretha Franklin, Della Reese, when her mother died, her hair turned gray overnight. And there are many cases, despite scientists saying it's impossible, of that happening.
Wow. I wonder if that's related to the benefits from like sauna therapy and cold therapy, like hot and cold therapy, if the shock factor is giving a lot of the benefits.
I think it could. Now, Vibrant Gal just reminded me that you can actually do the fingers, do your thumb, hold the left hand stable, and then use the other one to move on first your thumb and then your fingers. And you can actually grow hair. I haven't had the patience to do that, but I met somebody who he says his grandfather had nothing to do but sit around and watch TV. So he told him that, and he grew his hair back. And then I told a woman that, a high school girl, to use that to grow her hair out longer. And when I met her again a year later, she introduced me to her high school friend. This is the man who grew hair back on my head. I said, what? She said, my hair would not grow out. Now look at it, it's down to my waist in 1 year. I did that every night. So after that, I did that for a while. And I actually grew some hair back when I did it. But it just takes, I'm not the kind of person that goes into routines. So it hasn't done anything for me, but there are people who can help. Again, there's a lot of mysteries. Copper's involved, minerals are involved. Stimulation seems to be the main thing. Irritants. Putting 100 proof Smirnoff vodka was Pavarola's way. In acupuncture, they have what they call a shotgun needle. You have like a hairbrush with little needles, and you go like that all over the top of your head. Irritation is definitely one of the things that stimulates hair growth. The other thing is a loose scalp. My co-author of Yes, No, Maybe met a guy in France, and he said the reason people lose their hair is their scalp is not loose enough. He said, look at me. And by the way, he had a very full head of hair. He took a scalp and put it over his eyes.
Wow.
Now, I noticed mine, it's really tight. It can move where there's hair, but it won't move at all in places where there's no hair.
It gave me an image of the Men in Black scene where he pulls it. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I had a movie moment there. That's it. Or Face Off is another one. Yeah, I've heard the red light helmets work too. I think those are popular in China right now. Like the red LEDs you put on your head, and that's supposedly the red light can regrow it.
Interesting. There's a lot of mysteries about it. And then there's also the fact that I wrote a book on mesmerism and found out that your belief could make a whole bunch of things happen. And also energy that wasn't even your belief could make an energy. Applied kinesiology, you can affect things miles away. The police uses it as control techniques where they go up and down your body, your central meridian. They can't accept meridians, so the police call it splitting the optical field to weaken people, and they don't do it to strengthen. They want to disarm you, right? And it works. I learned that from from a Texas Highway Patrolman who told me how they do that. But you can do it through walls. We are not as isolated as we think we are. We're in a field of energy, and Rupert Sheldrake probably has a lot going on for his morphogenetic fields and how that works.
Yeah, that's interesting. I saw a video this morning of a police officer pulled over a woman. And she said, I thought you don't give pretty girls tickets. And he said, we don't. Here's your ticket. Funny videos on the internet.
There's some good stuff out there, definitely.
Yeah. I bought that book you recommended from Rupert Sheldrake on, was it Dogs and Telepathy or something like that? I still need to start. I have a million books I haven't started yet.
I've experienced that. I stayed with a psychologist friend of mine for months down in La Jolla, and she has 2 little dogs. Well, one time they ran to the door where she drove. The garage door would open, she'd drive in, and they'd go and greet her at the door. Well, they did it one time, and she wasn't there. About 5 minutes later, she drives up the street and drives in, and they're still at the door. So I watched them after that. As soon as they started barking, I went to the window and saw how long it would take the car to get there, and it was 5 minutes. So either they had super hearing where they could hear her wheel tires 2 or 3 or 5 blocks away, or they had some kind of Rupert Sheldrake phenomenon. Yeah, so it's a very real deal.
Wow. Yeah, the basic concept is like the morphogenetic field, right? And that your pets are tapping into that, and we're all connected through that field.
Very much like in the Don Juan books with the strings of energy that connect people through karma and things like that. I think it's very real. The first time I messed with it, I was shown a technique by Adano to affect people at a distance. So I had a buddy, very strong, 1,500 miles away in Sepulveda, California, and I was in Houston, Texas. So I said to his sister-in-law, can you do a muscle test and see how strong he is? Yeah, he's really strong. Then I did one of those techniques where you weaken the person's meridian, 1,500 or 2,000 miles away, I guess it is. Suddenly, he pushed his arm down like it was nothing. And then I said, okay, let's do it again. This time I did it up. It's stronger than he was before. So until then, I would have thought that was fiction. But then when I asked Donald Lay about it, he said, I wouldn't be doing that because healing is intimacy. He said, I could become a circus performer doing that. In fact, I met a guy who was hired by the Rams. No. What's the Texas team? Whatever it was, a Texas team to weaken the opposition by doing that kind of stuff from the stand. Didn't work too well because the other teams actually hire these people to do the same thing. It's done routinely, and I've met people who do it for a living that get paid very well. And they also show touch techniques like when you're hitting a person on the field, you pinch a certain area, an acupuncture point that weakens them for a half hour, and so that you get an advantage in the football game. This is done routinely. Psychic warriors on the football field and the baseball fields of America.
Well, I think I've been saying this for months, but we have to do a show on mind hacking and mesmerism and stuff you're talking about.
Anytime.
I just hope I have something to contribute because I had I had a lot of weird stuff happening growing up, but I don't know if it's related to those. It was mostly like seeing beings and stuff. I just told my Bigfoot story on social media last week, and people were like, raising an eyebrow to me, like, you're crazy. I'm like, well, I saw him in Northern California with my friend. We both saw Sasquatch. So I don't know, when two people see the same thing.
Yep. Yeah, I've even had manifestations happening, and I want to tell you a story since it's interesting that it happened today. I've been taking DHEA, right? So I bought my first bottle about 3 weeks ago, a month ago, and it was $10.95, and it was 10 milligram pills. I put them in a drawer here. Then I ran out. So this week I went and bought another bottle of 10. Well, this morning when I went in there, there's 3 bottles, and one of them is 25 milligram DHEA. So I told Vibrant Gal, were you taking DHA in the past? I've never taken it. I said, did you bring it with you? No, I used to think DHA was a scam, frankly. I wouldn't take it. So now I have this big bottle of DHEA, and maybe there's, even if it was there somehow, that someone put it in there physically, it still is pretty weird.
Interesting. That so almost sounds like a Mandela. It almost sounds like the Mandela effect. Have you heard of that? Like the Berenstain Bears and, the Star Wars Darth Vader quote and all the things that changed.
Yeah, I think there are strange things. When I hung around with the Swami, I saw stuff that doesn't make any linear sense at all, because he could basically manipulate reality.
Wow. Well, Elon Musk says we're in a simulation, right? A lot of people, I think Joe Rogan believes that, and there's a lot of validity to it, right?
I really wonder about it, and there's 3 of my favorite movies that point to that. One is called The Matrix, of course. Have you ever seen The 13th Floor?
That's on my list. I really have to watch that. Yeah, I'm going to add that to my movie list.
And have you seen Dark City?
Yeah. I have, because of you. That was a good one. Yeah.
That's one of my all-time favorites.
The 13th Floor. Yeah, it's like a suspense movie, not really a horror movie, or?
Yeah, very much Matrix type, maybe kind of in between Dark City. Same type of thing about what is reality. And it has one of the best endings in a movie I've ever seen. Really quite a surprise. It came out at the same time as The Matrix, but The Matrix got all the juice. At that time, I was watching 3 or 4 movies on a Saturday night alone, going to the movie theaters. And so I got to see all of them at that time. So that one didn't get by me. And since then, I've probably seen The Matrix 10 times, the 13th Floor 10 times, and maybe Dark City 15 times. I particularly like that one.
That's awesome. Yeah, last year I saw the first Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger for the first time. That was a pretty interesting movie. And I feel like I'm overdue for a Star Wars marathon, but
yeah, I'm a sucker for time travel movies.
That was my favorite.
I've had prophetic dreams before. A lot of people have much more than me. Mine are minor. My parakeet got away. I dreamed about it the night before. Went on a bicycle ride, and my mother let the parakeet loose.
Wow. Yeah, the prophecies are interesting because was it Nostradamus? I think I used to see History Channel shows about him, and there's a lot of people on the internet that make predictions about, was it Yellowstone, super volcanoes going off. I just read one last night. They were saying Yellowstone's supposed to go off. It was like May 22nd or 23rd this year. And they posted it like a year ago. I'm like, well, it's a few weeks away. We'll find out. Supposedly that would take out like 2/3 of the earth. I was reading that one off.
It's like waiting for California to fall in the sea, or all of those predictions that were going on. Remember that the Mayan prophecies? Everybody was waiting with bated breath for that day. Was it May or something, where the world was supposed to end.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of like boy who cried wolf things, right? Where, I mean, same thing with the monetary system collapsing. It's like, it feels good for me to prepare and like have like food and water security and stuff, but I don't expect it at the same time.
No, I think what's going on in Ukraine now is settled into another Vietnam and stuff, and they're not going to use nuclear weapons at this point. It looks pretty safe for now, but later on down the years, some crazy person is going to use a nuclear weapon eventually. But I don't think it's going to be for a while now. But
Right.
we're in a very peaceable time now when you think of it. Look at the First World War and Second World War, how people were affected. Vibrant Gal is from Europe, and she can tell you what was going on there. She's lucky to be alive to escape communist Hungary with what all the bloodshed that was going on there during the Hungarian Revolution.
Yeah, we're kind of living like kings and queens right now, right? Like we can go to the store and get DHEA and whatever we want.
We really are. We're, despite all the complaints we have, it really is really good for that kind of thing. It's very important, I think, that we preserve it and do everything we can to keep free speech and not be in places like in Switzerland. I just found out, you have to have the medical system, and you have to pay for it, and you have to go in and do this and do that. That's where they want to take this. They want it all to be medicine that they choose and put these implants in you to monitor your salt content and sugar content. And we know, of course, they know all about the sugar and the salt content that we need. Right.
Yeah. I just read something. Oh, Dick Durbin. Yeah, he wanted to introduce like a dietary supplements bill that would like really, some articles said it would like jail supplement owners, but it's just funny his name's Dick. It's always like life's kind of a joke with that.
Right. Yeah, we're fortunate right now. We may complain, but it's tightening up, and people need to read even Illich's Medical Nemesis and see what the truth is about the medical system, because it's much more than what's happened in the last 2 years. It's been going on since the time of HMOs and even before that. When even Illich wrote his book in 1973, it's a blow mind. It shows how pervasive the system is and how we're not allowed to die in our own homes, and that most of the therapies you get in the hospital could be done in your own homes. And now we're overbilled for it as well. Used to go to a hospital, it might just cost you a couple of $100. Now you're lucky if you get out of there with $50,000 or $100,000. Simple surgeries cost you thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yeah, what was it, around 1913? I think the Rockefellers outlawed a lot of natural medicine, and they made surgery and pharmaceuticals like the main thing.
They sure did. Rockefeller medicine, and yet they were into homeopathic remedies. Old man Rockefeller, he actually introduced, popularized Fletcherism, Kellogg, all of those people. Yoga was done by the Vanderbilts. We have yoga today in this country. The type of yoga we have is Vanderbilt yoga. It is not Indian yoga. They're two different things. They don't do hatha yoga in India, except when they went back, when we sent it back to the United States, back to India. Now they do American hatha yoga and call it Indian hatha
yoga. That's hilarious. Well, yesterday, Adam, I bought a book. You inspired me. I think I have the Medical Nemesis one on my bookshelf I have to read, but I found on Amazon, I think I bought the last one. Now it's $166. A book on cod liver oil and chemistry from 1895. So I'm hoping to find some gold in there about it.
I love the old books. They
the early
tell you things that you don't hear nowadays.
Yeah. Even the studies. That's what I appreciate about Morley Robbins. He's like, the older scientific studies are more truthful than the recent studies.
The new ones are mythology. First of all, even 50 years ago, there were no double barriers, membranes, ion pumps. All of that is false. The whole thing was started by the military, switched off into molecular biology, which was originally eugenics, took over at Cold Springs Laboratory, the eugenics lab, and all of this is basically fake. In fact, I teach timing. And timing now, they claim it's genetic. It's in your body. That's absolutely untrue. It's not at all. They had a guy named Professor Frank A. Brown Jr., and he was basically the father of chronobiology. They basically wrote him out of the history books, and now they have some genetic guy that became the new father of the chronobiology. It is not genetic. It is external. I guess that sounded too much like astrology. And with genes, you can patent genes. You can't patent the sun.
That's wow. Yeah, recently I've been talking with people about vitamin D supplementation, and these are like biochemistry majors that are really smart with the chemistry of everything, and they emphasize like vitamin D or vitamin D receptor gene mutations. But I think that kind of the systems made us like hyper focused on genes, right? And I think some people like Bruce Lipton and others have talked about epigenetics a lot and how it's more the environment, like the environment kind of like pulls the trigger, where genes load the gun.
The genes are way overrated. They are like fingerprints or iridology patterns in your iris. But who would ever say that your fingerprints control your destiny? But you can tell all kinds of things. You can identify by one fraction of your fingerprint. They can tell your history and maybe even now go back into your ancestry. But they can't. But with genetics, they say that controls your life. It's a total false. It's an intermediate way station between macro and minor. First of all, when they first introduced proteomics, controlling genetics, when I already knew that was what controlled genes, and they finally put it on Scientific American in about 2003, and they still don't get it. They still patent genes. There's glyconomics. There's a glycome. There's a proteome, and there's all these other ionomes and every other kind of nome you want to that are different way stations between. So genetics does not control our life. If you put a certain gene in, it will revert because it's an artificial construction and an artifact to boot.
Wow, that's well said. Well, Adam, this was really fun, and I always enjoy chatting with you. And thanks for all the work you're doing and all the awesome material that you're putting out, both on social media and through your ebooks. I always love reading them. I'm gonna have to purchase your copper one. I'm excited to dive into that.
Thanks for all you do, Matt.
Yeah,
really
so
everything you do.
Yeah, I appreciate you. And yeah, it's funny, your social media posts, it's like, anti-supplement, so to speak. You're like, get it from food. I'm friends with a lot of people like that, but then people like respond to those. What about Matt Blackburn? It's kind of funny to read.
I'm not even against supplements. I have charcoal, niacin things in my cabin. I just tend to not take them on a regular basis, but they are necessary to have around. Even Ray Peat, who is really anti-supplement, but at the same time, if you have diarrhea, you take B6. He has actually saved people's lives. From one kid was bleeding out, nothing would stop it. Gave him B6. He got it right out of Adele Davis. B1, I believe, for depression. The B2, he mentions individual vitamins for certain things. So I keep some on handy. You use Shilajit, I use Dolomite. I mean, I use it from time to time to get some extra minerals. So I'm not really anti-supplements. I'm against some of the newer supplements where they make up names, the kind you find in, say, what is that biotech magazine? Life Extension. People don't realize that's owned by the biotech community. It goes into not only the preserve your head and freeze it in Arizona, but it goes to the biotech community. They want to use genes like Aubrey de Grey to create an immortal body. It's not going to work through the genes. As much as I respect Aubrey de Grey's research on the 7 deadly sins of death, he's going at it the wrong way. Now they want to even stop him because there are people who are researching immortality like Jeffrey Epstein and like Aubrey de Grey, and they're coming after him. Now, Aubrey de Grey, who had the 7 deadly sins of death on Wikipedia, now all you see is that he groped 2 women, and he's a bad guy, and they fired him from sins and all of that. They're after anybody who has anything to do with immortality. Now, Jeffrey Epstein went at it the wrong way. I'm not saying he was a nice guy. Basically, you suck the energy out of young girls. That's an Indian technique, an ancient Indian technique that even Muhammad Gandhi used. He slept between 2 virgins.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting the character assassination that happens when someone's doing good and yeah, I saw like I don't know if it's true, but there's a YouTube or Netflix documentary of this guy that had ET contact. What was his name? Stan Romanek, and they said he was a child like pedophile. After he came out and showed evidence that they like fixed his knee and he had photographic evidence, video footage, and all this stuff. So it's interesting how it's so easy for people to just have that happen to them, and then they just get discredited, right? It's a fascinating aspect to human psychology.
And they are these rings that use energy. I was amazed. There's a certain guy, I'm not going to mention his name, initials DI, because I don't want to get you in trouble on Facebook, but he talked about these huge pedophile rings that were available. Well, I read in the front page of the London Times that they had exposed a pedophile ring where 800 boys came forward and named the biggest political people in Britain. Now, in bold print, they put a big box. This is not part of a conspiracy in the Illuminati. And they put it in the New York Times. I mean, in the London Times. So I was absolutely amazed at how much of industry in child selling children is. When I lived in Houston, there was a corner. I wondered, what are all the kids doing at this corner? Then I saw people coming up in Cadillacs and picking up these kids and all. It's in San Francisco, right 1 block from the police department that went on. This has been going on, and now they're putting it in the school system as making it all okay to do. You can be a he, she. Right. Even, I divorced my last wife in the 90s. She married a guy, and 20 years later, he's now a he, she. He decided to take the softening pills.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah. To me, that whole child stuff, that's like the darkest aspects to humanity to me, and probably one of the biggest motivations that keeps me going with this whole human health thing. Because I feel like the better we can get, the more humans that are functional, the more aware, and the more people will take action towards stuff like that. Like I saw the old Pinocchio cartoon from like 1940, and it was a whole 2-minute segment in that Pinocchio movie about Epstein Island. They called it Pleasure Island, and you could find it on YouTube. Search Pinocchio Pleasure Island, and they were like describing it. So this has been happening at least since the 40s, probably since the 1910 or who knows. And I feel like that's the real great reset, is where we start taking. And I know there are organizations like guerrilla, what's it called, like special forces types that just go around taking these rings out, which sounds like a fun job, but also dangerous.
Dangerous. Yeah, and they definitely exist. We have, they're fluoridating the water deliberately. They're putting fish oil tablets and promoting it that it's necessary for brain health deliberately. They have a whole bunch of other things they're doing to dumb us down. The worst being the educational system itself, with John Taylor Gatto, and even Illich wrote a book called Deschooling Society, how it's made for failure. And Gatto actually said the schooling system is part of the eugenics program. And he's right. I've followed it out quite a bit, read his books and everything, and read other things that go into the fact that the whole thing is a conspiracy. Hate to say it. I guess I'm a conspiracy realist.
Yeah. Yeah, because it gives us a lot of stuff to unlearn, right? Like you learn how to balance equations, and you learn about different valences and reduction and oxidation and all of these things. But then you have cell membranes and the stuff you mentioned before that's questionable, ion channels.
Communist China, they treat it the same way. That's a great danger. The only thing we have is that the New World Order is not monolithic. It's like the five mobs in New York. They have fights. And right now, we have Russia, we have China, United States, and even little Korea, North Korea and India. They're all major players, and they all want a piece of the action. So they agree on certain things enough to what they did in the last 2 years to be the same treatment in almost every country around the world. When you think about that, that's staggering. What happened to the traditional Chinese medicine, all the things they claim, the folk medicines in various areas, the Japanese shamans or whatever? What happened to all of that? It's all been submerged under the rubric of public health. There's no such thing as public health. It's all individual. And what we put in our mouth and what we say out of our mouths is our own health. And it's up to us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have you seen any of the documentaries about North Korea, Adam? I saw one last year where, you go into a restaurant and it's just, you're the only person at a table in a large banquet kind of setting. And it seems like it's just run by robots. Like it's just such a surreal. I mean, talk about a simulation. You just look at that country. It's really trippy.
That's how they want the whole world, too. That's the scary thing. Yeah, that's a pretty serious country. Even if you have, what is that type of rock group that comes out of Korea? If you watch that, it's a death penalty.
Wow. Yeah, one of my favorite things you said on the show was every time you use the self checkout at the grocery store, you're making a vote for artificial intelligence.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is interesting how if Silicon Valley wants to bring this whole thing on, and even Elon Musk, I think out of the bad guys, he's one of the better bad guys, but they all want to make us robots, basically, and implant us. And when you think about it, it started with hearing aids, glasses, teeth in a dentist and all that. We're already partly there when you think about it. Implants in the brain, pacemakers, now pig hearts, which I told people a lot of the last 2 years was to make it safe to put pig hearts in our body. You're going to see that a lot more. And a pig heart, actually a dog heart is much closer to a human heart than a pig heart. But they're never going to they'll never use dogs, thank goodness, for dog lovers.
Wow. I imagine energetically it changes things, right? To have a pig heart instead of a human heart.
It is interesting. The Valentine heart you see is more like a pig heart than a dog heart or a human heart. So, but they've been planning the pig heart thing for a long time. Instead of rejuvenating the heart, they want to replace it. They want to put parts in. They've basically become a parts store is what they want. Something fails, just put a new one in. Make your prosthetics more real, make them flesh-like and whatever. so that we'll be half synchronized into androids or whatever you call them.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw I think you might have liked the post. I think I posted it maybe last year. It was like the sex robot, because those are becoming more popular, but they're becoming like artificial intelligence, like really smart. And there's whole social media accounts now where it's like the guy's girlfriend, and he's like, every post is with this AI, quote, woman. It's really interesting.
Yep. Pretty soon they're going to demand palimony.
Yeah, I wonder how. I don't know if they created laws yet for marriage with robots and all that. It's a whole thing.
It's just a matter of time, seriously, when they get into that. Because people want to get rid of human feelings. With machines, you get rid of humanity, and that's what they want. They don't want people to be human, to interface. They want to keep them separate from each other, have blockages to their face, and so you can't read their body language. They want your doctor to be in another state, performing surgery by robots in your state. And all of that really, if they really work smart, there are answers to almost every medical problems they have that are simple, that you can do at home in most cases. But they don't want people to know that. And those cures were available 100 years ago a lot of times. They would tell people how to do it. Actually, before the Second World War, and even during the war, they would tell people how to grow their own food, how to fix their own wounds and everything, because they were busy fighting a war. But once that came over, they had great convocations where they got together in scientific meetings and said, we won't let people know anymore that antibiotics grow in your backyard. You just have to know the amount of oxygen and sunlight to put to it, and you can have an antibiotic for anything. We'll say it comes from penicillin and mold, and the only place you can ever get it. And we'll tell them this and we'll tell them that. They've hid all that. Wow. Back in 1943, they decided chlorella was a more powerful antibiotic out of chlorella than was penicillin. Penicillin is not even an antibiotic, it's an abiotic. Chlorella is a real antibiotic, but you can get it out of your, they had worked out all of the things in your backyard, the vines, the trees and everything, how dangerous they were. Some were more dangerous, what time to take them. All of that you can find in the old science magazine. Now it's erased from history. I call it medical amnesia.
Yeah. And the common person would just say, oh, is that safe? I mean, that's usually what you hear with hunting and foraging. It's just it's very fear-based. If you take something from the woods, it's like, didn't you see that movie where the guy ate the mushroom and he died? It's like
right.
Was that Into the Wild? And yeah, it's just
one of my friends goes by the name of King Kahani now, and he can survive any place. He can go out into any woods in any country and live off the land. He's a good friend of mine. He's managed, he was an agricultural engineer. He's managed vineyards. He's managed coffee plantation, I think a tea plantation too. And his father is the one that invented the drug at the same time. Remember the movie with Robin Williams and Robert De Niro about the man who they got his intelligence back? His father invented that drug at the same time, but got no notoriety for it. Wow. And he also invented a drug for a disease for pets, and like a leprosy. And his son, my friend King Kahani, got that disease when they were on a ship. And he used the dog drug on his son and cured him as the first cure. So King Kahani is one of the most unusual people I've ever met. And these people exist, and they have solutions to like the way we desalinate water. There's cheap ways. He knows this thing. He has all these degrees, but because he's in the United States, he has no credentials in the U.S., so they ignore him.
Wow. Well, Adam, where can people find you? It's Sunsync Nutrition and solartiming.com, right? Both those sites?
sunsyncnutrition.com. Solartiming.com is where we sell the books. And we're up to about 45 of them now, I think, from $99 down to $5.99. I think I even have one. Most of them $10.99, $19.99, and so. And the Yellow Fat Disease series is $99 for all 14 books now. And then on sunsyncnutrition.com, that's $99, and I do blogs, and we have a color visualization video where you go through from black to white and go through all the colors and recycle your brain. A whole bunch of other things on that site too. Lists of food, how to calibrate your exact time, and all of those things. So
that's awesome. Yeah, a few people send in questions like, I want to get into chronobiotic nutrition and solar timing, but it seems so complicated. And I recommend people go to the SunSync Nutrition and just pay $100 for the lifetime and get the food list. I know late last year I was just delving in really intensely into that, and it just makes it so easy to see which drinks and foods. And I was really into the cranberry and grape juice for a few months there. That was really enjoyable midday.
Yep, it makes a difference. I've been doing it since 75 now. So
wow.
Pretty much, I'd say 90 to 95%. Once in a while, I put a tiny bit of Bubby's pickle in my egg at night or something like that for a little flavor. I use a little pickle juice. But all in all, I'm probably been most of my life 95, or most of the time since I started, 95 to 99% solar. It's worked really well for me.
That's incredible. Wow. Well, I'm excited to have, as I build my homestead out, more food options here, and I'll be able to dial it in better. That's all for today's show. Hope you guys enjoyed Adam's wisdom and his going against the grain. I always encourage people that listen to this show to listen with an open mind, even if you don't agree with everything that someone shares. Recently, I had Jason Hommel on the show that just wrote a book called The Copper Revolution. And he's a huge fan of high dosing copper. That's what he's been doing for several months now, both orally and topically, getting up to even 100 milligrams a day. And people might be confused when they look at Atom Bergstrom's book on copper. And in the introduction, he says, copper deficiency is very rare. Most people get excess copper in their diet, but their organs, especially the liver, are extremely efficient at neutralizing and eliminating it. And whichever side of the discussion that you're on, if you think that most people are copper deserts and deficient, like Jason and Morley, or if you think that copper deficiency is not a real issue, like Atom Bergstrom, I think it's wise to study Jeff Lawton's work on NPK fertilizer, because there's not a lot of information out there about it. And there's only a few people ever mentioning the name Justus von Liebig and the invention of fertilizer and how that came to be and how Justus was framed and how we were basically bamboozled into this salt-based fertilizer, organic or not. It's the same thing. And even your farmers market growers still use that fertilizer. There's a 99.9% chance. And that is pretty much all the food that we've been raised on in our entire life. If, like me, you were raised in San Diego, California, or a big city like that, and you weren't raised on a farm where they were doing permaculture and biodynamic farming, let alone growing food in a greenhouse, which to me is the gold standard, in my opinion, with just the state of the world and acid rain and chemtrails and all the things that we're dealing with now that affect the soil. So I consider all of that, and I tend to agree with Morley and Jason Hommel on this point, that most people are copper deficient. But I love that there are people like Adam out there that are experimenting, and he's super sharp, as you can hear. I mean, his memory is incredible, especially for his biological age. So obviously what he's doing is working. So I'd imagine the mental, emotional, spiritual health plays a huge role. I don't know if it's more than the physical health, but in my opinion, it's at least equal to the importance of physical health. And obviously it's all connected, but you support each one in different ways. I love that Adam focuses so much on the who's the matter. As he says, disease is often not what's the matter, it's who's the matter. And if you can get down to that and find out the male or female that someone has a trauma with and clear it, then you could have instantaneous healing, which really blows the mind, because what if that person's iron overloaded and magnesium deficient, retinol deficient, copper deficient, just hypothetically, and they have all of these mineral imbalances and electrolyte deficiencies, and they still have spontaneous healing. Maybe it doesn't last and it's not long term. I'd be curious to hear more anecdotal stories like that, but it's still very fascinating. So just keep an open mind. That's my message. And just listen to what Atom Bergstrom has to say and connect the dots with your experience, which I think is very valid to go off of, because oftentimes my experience is the complete opposite of what the alternative health community is talking about, and even the alternative health community is talking about. So if you want to check out Adam's books, you can go to solartiming.com, and he has full-length ebooks and mini ebooks if you click on the store. And they're all incredible. His series on lipofuscin is amazing. And you can get all of them for $100, called the Yellow Fat Disease Compendium. So if you feel like really diving in to the lipofuscin thing, highly recommend purchasing all of them at once for $100. It's a great deal. And his other website is sunsyncnutrition.com. And for a lifetime fee of $100, well worth it. Again, you get access to his food list. So I've gotten messages before from people saying they really want to dive into this solar timing, solar nutrition, chronobiotic nutrition idea of eating different foods at different times and having different drinks at different times. And he lays it all out on that food list. So you just pay the $100, you get a login, click food list, and then it will show you from 12:30 midnight to noon the first growth zone, and then growth zone 2 from 11:30 a.m. to 7 p.m., and then the third growth zone from 6:30 p.m. to 1 a.m. And it's really fun to experiment with. I definitely don't follow it 100%, but it's kind of cool to know certain times of the day you're actually going to unlock or absorb more nutrition from your food. And as always, if you want to support the show, you can go to matt-blackburn.com. I have my CLF protocol up there under blogs. And today I'd like to highlight the infratonic Chi Palm from the Chi Institute. This is a really cool device that I learned about from my friend Brandon Amalani of Shen Blossom. And it's basically inaudible sound coming through this battery-powered device. And so it spans a frequency range from 1 hertz all the way to 600 hertz. And it can run for 60 hours on a single charge, which is really cool. And they basically say to put it where it hurts. So if someone has pain or inflammation, say in their neck, you could just hold it up to your neck. But it's very versatile. I actually put it on the sleep mode on my thymus. They often instruct people to try it on their thymus when I'm using my new calm or taking a nap. And it feels really calming and grounding. So there's various ways to do it. You can use it for sleep and relaxation, they say emotional turbulence, or you could also use it for injuries, wounds, bruises, different things like that. And it's one of my favorite devices. I just love how portable it is. You can easily throw it in your luggage and take it with you or take it on the road. And the testimonials for this thing are unbelievable. So if you go to resources on their site and then click research, they have some cool stuff up there, including one on the trembling of hands. And they found that just 3 minutes of the infratonic therapy and it reduced tremendously. So if you'd like to try it out, you can use the discount code Blackburn and you'll save 10% on your order. My brand is called Mitolife, and you can find my products at mitolife.co, and it's mitochondrial focused. And so the goal is to restore balance to vitamins and minerals in the body so that you can actually generate energy. And I have some other cool little therapies in there, like an endotoxin reducer using spore-based probiotics and systemic enzymes, which is such a versatile therapy. And I'm still surprised when people haven't heard about it, because these are like little Pac-Man proteolytic enzymes that circulate in your body for hours, breaking down accumulated proteins and fibrin and scar tissue. And one of its less well-known applications that I've used before is if I'm underslept. So if I happen to not get a good night's sleep, first thing in the morning, popping 6 to even 12 of them at a time, which is huge dose, not recommending that, but taking a dose of Dissolvidol when you're underslept. And I've found that it seems to take the stress off my system and help me have a better day until I can get to nap time to fully recharge. So it's a very versatile supplement. Another way I would use it is if you're on the road and say you forgot to get snacks, or you're just going longer than usual without eating, you might as well pop some Dissolvidol to get those enzymes to work while you're just sitting there driving. And so there's multiple different ways to use it. The normal way that I would use it is just take it on an empty stomach upon waking every morning. And you could have your orange juice or your smoothie or whatever, but I would wait, 15, 20, 30 minutes before you eat solid food to let it get to your small intestine. And go through and read the testimonials on the website. They always blow me away when I read about people's experience with these supplements. And that's the power of adding in the right ones and taking out the ones that are actually causing imbalance. And I want to give a quick update with the Shilajit tablets, the Panacea product. We've been working hard to get that back in stock. With the current world events with Russia, and even mentioning that country on social media gets you in trouble. It's getting really Orwellian here on the planet. And so long story short, we are going to have that back definitely by the end of May. So just look out for that, and there should be a pretty good supply. So really appreciate your support, whether you're buying the Mitolife products or not, or just listening to this podcast. It's a lot of fun, and I learned so much, and I love implementing what I learn from guests and experimenting and connecting more dots. So that's it. I will see you guys next Friday. Stay supercharged.